Good afternoon. So I said I'd do a stream today, and obviously I've been encountering computer issues as per usual, so it's later than expected, but here we are. And hopefully the computer will remain up to it. Um, I hope everyone's doing well. There's not much change since my last stream, really. Not on Bitcoin, obviously bounce came back up. Can't remember when I did it. I think it was like Monday, so it would have been as we were falling into here. Actually, it was before we hit this low. So, okay, so just starting on Bitcoin, obviously still in this bigger range. We've had a couple of wicks below it. There's a lot of things I was thinking about this earlier, and I put some new entries in for possible longs, but I have to say I really don't like them. So obviously we're watching zones as and when they're hit, and looking for reversal formations on the lower time frames as and when the zones are hit. So, but do be careful and take things with a pinch of salt. And the reason I say that is the bigger picture. Moving things around. Just checking I can see my stream and the connection's still good. Yeah, so the reason I say that, let me just hide everything for a minute, is just because of the possibility of this double top. So if we go to the higher time frame, so it's different. There are different things, and I want to be bullish. I want to still be bullish, but I don't like being bullish at resistance. But obviously, okay, you've got back here in 2021, our top was basically a double top with a swing failure, and that's essentially kind of what we're looking at the moment on this. The major difference is we've had a 3-monthly close, which has created a 3-month demand. We've got an annual demand down here. We've got another 3-month, which wasn't quite tested here, which is probably what makes me most nervous. So we've closed with a 3-month weak demand. It's weak because it's a swing failure of the high. But it's still a decent, strong candle, but it's not as strong as we'd like. You know, we'd like it to be closing significantly higher than the last drop. So that's kind of what makes me nervous on those time frames. Sorry, though, that's what makes me comfortable on those time frames, that we have 3 months demand in here. Whereas if you look back at the 2021 top, there was no 3 months demand to hold this up when it started retesting, and thus it came back lower and came back into this consolidation for the bounce. And I don't like. I'm struggling with this to compare, because can you really compare? Like the PA here is completely different to the previous runs for a start. So obviously these are very strong green candles going up, whereas this is actually much more still an impulsive move from an Elliot Wave perspective, but it's much weaker compared to the previous runs. We also have ETFs involved now in institutions, so the people buying here are very different to the people who are buying back here. Or to some extent, maybe slightly less so in 2021, because we had Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy and Elon Musk and all that sort of stuff. But it's still kind of different here. You know, we've got ETFs involved. But so structure obviously is still strong. The high time frame is still up, but we've got some nervousness coming in now of this swing failure of the high on the 3-month chart. So, but you know, the only thing we can do is wait and see that 3-month zone when it's tested, and see if it reacts and see if it holds. But from a high time frame perspective, you know, that would be your first buy in there, and then your second buy, unfortunately, is still very close in the 3-month below. Should we, you know, given we've taken out the high of this 3-month, maybe we'll take out the low of this 3-month, back into that 3-month demand below that wasn't quite tested. You know, additionally, we've got this annual zone that hasn't been tested down there. Again, this didn't quite come and test the close, but it did test in the wicks there. Whereas this hasn't even quite got to the wick there for a retest. So then, yeah, back on the lower time frame. So if I go to the weekly, as I said, we've got this structure here, which has similarities with the structure here. It's weaker. This was more aggressive. This was had much more volatility here. This is obviously much lower volatility, and we're clearly seeing this being held up by the ETFs as well, by ETF buying all last week, push this back up again. The difficulty, I guess, when you're looking for entries then is, you know, taking all of that into consideration. So if we consider the bull case, and the bull case is that we hold this immediate 3-month demand, it's still a very large zone. So I've got to, you know, I tend to put black crosses when they're either weaker zones or whether I'm less certain about them. And green crosses doesn't necessarily mean, it means I'm more confident, but a green cross, just bear in mind it doesn't have to, that's relating to the whole zone, so it doesn't have to bounce off the top. The other problem you have is when you have so many areas that haven't been tested, then, and even in here, like I was struggling to pick a decent level should we have come down into this lower 3-month, hence why I had 4 crosses in there, and there were good reasons for bouncing at each of those levels. But the problem is what we have found in the past is when I have too many zones like that, we just run through everything. So try and find, I think, examples of that and more on the low time frames. And again, the challenge is, if I look at, so let's say we do follow this similar pattern to 2021, and that this does count as a double top. Are we going to bounce on each of these zones? So that if the crosses up near current price that I've got in at the moment, or the possible entries, are they similar to this, where we're going, this is 4 weeks of bounce, so there's certainly a month of tradable longs in there and shorts before positioning potentially for a bigger short. So, or alternatively, are we just going to do a giant red down move like we saw on Ether? And I'll compare to Ether in a minute, because that was also a similar comparison, my similar concern. So I'm kind of like, do I put possible entries here just purely because I don't want people to get wrecked if they are trading them blindly, even though I always say you've got to trade them once you see a reversal, once you see some sort of a pattern. Are we going to get bounces on the way down and then a bigger bounce on the bottom and then get the bigger drop? So similar to, where's my, so for example, I don't know if I should go, no, I'll just do it this time frame just so you can see, but maybe we'll do this. Bigger bounce off the 3-month, come back for stops, bigger bounce, then here, and then, even if we are going all the way back down to there, it could happen like that. But then similarly, it could also happen like that because it's crypto. So that's the challenge I have, and the risk you have when you have so many untested zones throughout a big move up like that. So just quickly on Ether again, so the challenge and structurally, so anyone who follows me will know that I was strongly predicting this based on Ether's past PA. Ether's obviously slightly different to Bitcoin because these highs hadn't taken out this high, so we were on a lower high anyway. But Ether has shown obviously quite a few of these, retest and then drop, and then double top there, and then a bigger double top here. And then my concern on Ether in the very big picture has always been, okay, then now we potentially got this. So there are always those things to worry about, and that's kind of where I feel we're at on Bitcoin. Like it's I don't want to be bearish because Bitcoin particularly has so much high time frame demand, but we're in this retesting high. Are we going to make a lower high? If we do make a lower high, and my reticence with all the long entries is we could have, what Ether did is it made this double top and then it just ran through. So when on the equivalent of Bitcoin, if I've got entries here or here, Ether barely, this one I think did give a bit of a bounce there and then wicked through. So we did get some smaller bounces, but this bigger one here, just wick came straight down all the way through this zone. So that's the real risk. The other thing, I guess, which makes me slightly more bearish on Bitcoin is Ether, again, as people know who follow me, I'm bearish on this. There's, again, pros and cons, always pros and cons. I mean, Ether now, I was thinking about it earlier, is kind of becoming into like a sideways triangle structure, which is going to make it more challenging. But so you can be bullish. I'm going to draw on all the drawings will come back. I can be bullish based on the fact we're in an up move and we're making a higher low. So that's, sort of a bull scenario. But then you can be bearish based on the fact we broke this demand. We haven't quite touched this demand. So, and now we're testing a 3-month supply. So my preferred move from here would be reject here and come down, and again, if we are going to make a higher low, but come down, take out that last low into this 3-month demand properly. And this is assuming we're bullish and we're not just doing a double top and going to come back down into the annual zone here, or I joke that 750 or 500 are kind of my preferred long entries on Ether in the very big picture. But Ether, I'm bear bias on Ether because we've got 3 months supply. I won't go in the majors now because we'll get to them a bit later, but the majors are the same. We've got DOGE and Link both made 1 month supply. Link also made 6 months supply. ADA, I think a bunch of the others, ADA, DOGE, Atom, I think all made like 1 month, 2 month supplies, some closer to the price, and some of these are very close to the current price as well. So they're all weak, and that's the other challenge, is they're all weak supply. So much as I just described for Bitcoin having, you know, weak 3 month demand, it doesn't mean it's not going to bounce. It doesn't mean it's not going to reject. And more to the point, so you may not want to short any of those majors on the 1 month supplies, or Link, you know, the 6 month is massive. So you may not want to short immediately there, but I also don't want to trade against it. So again, like with that in mind, plus other observations I've made and been making on the others chart and the new total, what is it, total E100 chart. Yeah, I think all those things make me slightly reticent. Now, alts, it doesn't matter so much because obviously Bitcoin can go up and that can kill alts as well. But obviously we still run the risk. You know, is this a double top? Is this a, you know, a failed breakout and we're going to drop? I'd like to believe that's not going to happen, but we shall see. So from a shorter term, lower time frame perspective, okay, so you can see these entries that I've got. So I've, you know, alerted the 3 month demand area down there. I had this entry previously, you know, because there were some stops. If you look at the to the 3 day time frame, you can see there are some stops under here. There's a little bit of trend line stop. So I previously had alerted on this CME close level where the question mark is. So those are the sort of the bigger drop scenarios. Don't really need to go. We'll see what happens if we get down any lower than that. You know, the 61 fib is lower. So, you know, again, down here in this weekly zone inside the 3 months is a reasonable entry. Those are the more higher time frame. But at the moment, we're in a weekly supply, but we've flipped it to a weekly demand again, weekly. With a WEAK. So this is a weekly demand zone. It was a weekly supply zone. So again, it's just that sort of indecisive. I mean, essentially, it's in a range, and that's why I say just you know, really, that's what we should just be looking at. Your range with that at the top, and probably that, you know, that initial low is your low. And if we break and close below there, we can look for shorts, and if we break and close above here, we can look for longs. The other thing, again, just to be aware of to the upside that I've talked about, and so I like to watch the 113 and then the 113 because Bitcoin can overextend. The 113% extension fib is what's known as the failed wave based on harmonic technical analysis theory. So yeah, and the 113 we saw on Ether, again, if you follow my previous Ether analysis, all of those, go back to that chart quickly, all of these previous, this is a 113 extension of that. There are, I think there were some smaller, maybe it wasn't actually on Ether. This wasn't a 113 extension. I don't know. No, actually on Bitcoin, I think this has more 113 extensions from previously. Bitcoin, I think like this, for example, from that first high drop up to that high was in the 113% area. So this is the 113% area. I think it's a slightly short of it, so it doesn't have to get there either. But there are a lot of examples across all the charts and in both directions. Here, I think was a 113 extension of this final drop and consolidation. So I like to always just be aware of where the 113 is in case we get what's considered a failed wave. So it is still possible based on the existing structure. What I would like to think that would happen, I feel is reasonable probability, is that we're going to hold here on this weekly demand. You know, we've already had the bounce off the top of that. We've got a 2 day current price, and we're dipping into that a little bit now. But I'd like to say we're going to hold here, or, you know, even if it's lower in the zone, we'll hold this zone, we go up, and then we go into that 113 area, and that would be my preferred area to look for a short if we're going to have the bear scenario. It's possible we break down from here, I don't know, like maybe that swing fail has already happened, but, you know, it is unusual for Bitcoin to just make a first high and that be the end of it. Like normally it makes that second high, and then that's where the 113 extension comes into play if you're looking for shorts, or probably the same to the long side. So for now, yeah, we're in a bull scenario. We've got 3 month demand below. At current price, we've got this weak flip of a weekly supply to a demand, which held on that low earlier this week. I've got that as a question mark because I wasn't thinking in detail about this, and I just verbally talked about this in the video. I said I'd like to see a bounce potentially on this 12-hour inside this weekly just to see what the reaction is there. And obviously then I was looking for shorts up in this 12-hour supply and then with the possibility of taking out these highs. So that last wick hasn't taken out those highs. So again, it makes it difficult because you're then questioning, is it going to come back and take out those highs? The thing to be aware of on that is that CME did. So it's possible, I don't know if CME is going to close, that the US dollar pair will come back and do that swing failure this weekend. So that'd be something to watch out for. But again, CME is still in that strong upward structure. We've got monthly and 3-monthly demand down there. We've got a weekly demand here. It's actually likely to be a 2-week, assuming we don't have a crash in the next few hours before the market closes. We've got a 3-day demand at current price. I mean, all of this is still bullish. But yeah, it's bullish right at resistance. And people say consolidations at resistance are good. In my experience, it hasn't been. In my experience, when you see so much consolidation at resistance, it will normally die afterwards. However, when I kind of tried to validate that by looking back at the charts, I felt it was a bit 50-50. Like in a perfect world, you want to see this, kind of where it runs straight up through, it pauses very briefly and then runs straight up through everything and takes out the high. That's kind of what I like to see. But I think there are other examples where it has or hasn't consolidated. So here we kind of got a brief consolidation at resistance. So yeah, I guess the upshot is my bias is still long for now because demand is all still holding, but we are at the upper end of the range. So if you see any short setup on the off chance we are in a reversal kind of scenario where we've taken out that previous all-time high from January, and we're not going to go any higher, and this is just consolidating and doing a distribution pattern, and we're going to drop, then it's certainly not out of the realms of possibility. Then you should consider positioning some shorts as well. I haven't done any shorts on this chart at the moment. I've done some on the lower time frame because I've already had the high. This is supposed to be the higher time frame entries. I will get to those in a moment. Let me try and think if there's anything else that needs to say. Oh yeah, one other thing in favor of us potentially holding these demands and going back and at least taking that out that high, if not just being bullish and going up. I should think we clarified. Obviously, it is very much an option that we just go on and make a high. I'm talking about possible short entries and possible reversals, but they are very low probability at this point in time. Korea hadn't quite hit that 12-hour supply there. So at this high, so there is a possibility again, like at the weekend, this is going to come back and take out those highs and then maybe come back to status quo before CME reopens on Monday. Again, I've talked previously about the fact Korea hasn't made a higher high here anyway. So from the January high where the US dollar pair has taken this high out, Korea hasn't. Back in 2021, it did eventually. And we did consolidate and hold on until the second push did take out the higher high on Korea as well. So but again, like, doesn't necessarily have to operate the same, but it's something to look for if we end up in that direction. So for me, like, all these things, they don't have to happen, but what I'm looking for is if they happen and if they happen at the same time. So if we get a bounce here and Korea hits this 12-hour at the same time as the US dollar pair swing fails the previous high, being higher in structure, then that's good confluence for a possible short. If we get a bigger up move and Korea comes up, and that would be quite a significant up move on, let's actually measure that and see. So from where we are now, if Korea comes up and takes out the high, all-time high itself and stops there, like, let's say that's 11%. So if the US dollar pair does the same from current price, 11%, that's going to be 120k. So it's those things to be watch out for. And to be aware, you know, like, because once we get up in here on Bitcoin, we're in white space. Like I can say, you know, I have these 113 to 127 extensions. I've done a couple of different waves here, which is why I've got a few. I've got the red box and a couple of black boxes. So I've done the bigger 113 extension of this last down move since January, which is obviously the larger box. I've done, I think, this smaller move from May down to end of May down to end of June. Which I think is that one. Try and find where my fib is. I'm selecting it. Yep. And then what's the middle box? Can't even remember now. Apparently I've lost a box. Actually, it might be the two different boxes. Might be log and linear. Oh no, you know what it is actually. It's the giant. I just haven't got the fib in there. I don't think. I think it's this massive wave. No, that would have gone higher. No, that's a lot higher than. I don't know, maybe. I remind myself. Sometimes I do so much analysis, I just do heaps and heaps of analysis, and then I forget like what I've actually done or what the intent was. And then I'll sort of draw a box and delete all the analysis surrounding it, and it becomes hard to judge, you know. So that's obviously a lot higher, so coming up at 127 fib there. So there'll be the bigger wave and the smaller wave. Maybe there's only two, and I'm just going crazy, and for some reason I've got two large boxes there, and I don't know why. But I've only got two fibs in there for now anyway. Either way, I'll try and fiddle with that later and figure out what I did. But broadly, we're looking at, I think there's some overlap with around the 115 mark between the three boxes. And then obviously the 120, as I said, like if Korea took out the all-time high, then it's possible that 120 would come into play. But it's those things that I would look at for confluence if we get to that area. I feel like these boxes actually might just be the log and the linear. Yeah, I think I can see, so this is the linear chart, and I can see that aligns with 113 to 127. And then if I go to the log chart, yeah, so it's just the log and the linear of this larger move. So the overlap between kind of all those three is around here, 115, 116. So that'd be just an area I would want to watch for a possible rejection if we do go up there. But frankly, like, you know, again, it's high risk, and you certainly wouldn't want to be shorting blindly up there. Having some protein shake. Yeah, so on the lower time frame, I've kind of added, I mean, on the long side, I've just added all the same entries in. I haven't got, I think, I've only put one local. So you can see here we've got this giant weekly zone. And then I did have an entry down here at like 99 because that wick on 23rd of June, let me just put my mouse highlighter back on. This wick down here on the 23rd of June didn't quite hit that zone, so it's possible it goes back to the bottom there, but I've decided I was being a bit too conservative. So, you know, this is an 8-hour demand here. It is at the 70 fib. It is in a weekly demand, so I think it's again worth watching if this range is going to hold, to see if we get a bounce there. On the short side, you know, again, the lower time frames, it's the same challenge that last night we made a 2-hour supply, which we talked about in the group, and that would have been a nicer early short entry. Apart from this, so I had the original short, which was on this big 8-hour supply, and then the follow-up short would have been if we took out that high, so we didn't quite reach that. So the higher time frame short is the first one, and then you're looking for those re-entries, and you're looking for the consolidation that gives you re-entries. So verbally, we just talked about this 2-hour supply last night in the group. Since then, we've made an 8-hour supply, which is where the cross is, and again, these wicks didn't quite hit it. I'll show you the 8-hour, so you can see it closed below here, and that wick just didn't quite come up there. So I've marked that as a possible area for a swing failure. But again, the challenge is, okay, so 8-hour supply here. So strictly, if you're trading the 8-hour, and your entries here are all DCAing through the zone with your stop above here. But with these larger moves, it makes it harder, and people are looking to me for utter precision on where the price is going to reject. And on Bitcoin, that's been a lot harder recently. There's an hourly inside it that is untested, and then there's also this, I think this is a 10 or 15 minute right at the top that's untested. So that would be kind of your last hurrah for yet another lower high. That's presuming we come back there. And now we're currently testing this large 2-day demand. On on that. So yeah, those are the only other entries that I've got that aren't on the larger chart. And I think, and yeah, so I know I do have this on the larger chart, so that's that 8-hour demand. So I've got that first one. And I guess when the other comparison I wanted to make with this is obviously what we're doing now is not dissimilar to the consolidation we had from the start of last year. And the difficulty is, is if we're at that point, which we've had 1, 2, 3 hits the high. This is a longer time frame involved, but again, we've had 1, 2, and this is the third hit to the high. Potentially is where we are now, and you can see this one has then run straight through. There was no bounce on that demand for a higher low, and that again was my reticence about placing any of these entries. So in this, on the smaller picture, again, are we just going to get something like back last year and we just run straight through this and get a bounce in here? In the much bigger picture again, are we ending up with a giant consolidation that's going to be like this, in which case are any of these going to hold, or are we just going to run straight down deeper? And I guess that's why I've been sort of a little bit on the fence about giving entries lately, because when things become very messy and choppy, it becomes hard. US dollar dominance is not dissimilarly hard. So this is what I would normally use for then further confluence. So we didn't flip a weekly on this, the supply with the equivalent demand on Bitcoin. We did make a 2-day yesterday, which obviously we're pushing up inside, but we're still holding a 5-day demand. And this is obviously a very corrective move. This was my bear scenario for US dollar or bull scenario for the market, and it didn't necessarily, I never thought it was going to do that necessarily. We were talking about that maybe around here, but somebody had said they thought it was bullish, and I said actually I think to me this looks quite corrective. All these waves are doing very big retraces, and if that then ends up as a bear flag, then you could just get that big drop down, and that's kind of what I was demonstrating with that. It's obviously we've had the start of that, but we need to come up and have a test. You've lost 1,000 in a long trade. Please help you. You're still in the long trade, or have you got liquidated or stopped out? Yeah. So anyway, again, the challenge on this is a few things. We're in this large descending triangle. We've got a 3-month supply up here, which just got slightly missed off that wick. It then made a 2-month supply, which obviously that swing failed of that, and then it rejected that. So again, like all these are, rejecting supply, rejecting supply, rejecting supply. However, we are now in a big 6-month demand at the low. So the challenge on this is the 6-month going to be enough to push this all the way back through all the new supply that's coming? Particularly now, the 3 months has been tested very close. The new 2-month got wicked through and then retested. So all this supply has now been tested. And again, similar with Bitcoin, it's all the demand's been tested, but is that enough? In Bitcoin, is there enough demand on this? Is there enough supply for it to actually do a bigger continuation move down lower, in this case, lower into the 6-month zone? The other confluence factors I would look at for Bitcoin, if it makes an new all-time high, is when we get a test here on this is a new monthly demand that we have here. So when we get a test on or in there, those kind of zones, I would look for where's Bitcoin then? Are we going to get a retracement or a reversal on Bitcoin? And very much so if this hits, or when this hits, I should say, on this is the 61 fib inside the 6-month zone. But yeah, so I guess the challenge is that these, delete some things, we're getting just very small moves in here, and as I've been saying for a while, you need to, like I've said, it's better to trade alts than Bitcoin anyway. I think you're going to get higher probabilities. I think alts are still hard in themselves because people always want to long them, and it's very hard to find that one runner. Or there's a few runners each day, but it's very hard to find in 700 plus alts, and those are just the ones on the centralized exchanges, like which is going to be the runner. So yeah, for me, it's just trading small swings and seeing what happens. But this is, again, in a very indecisive spot. We had a swing fail of that weekly. you know, are we going to come up in here and get a drop, you know, or is this going to pick up 5-day demand and get a larger up move before a drop? Or are we just playing out we're now playing out a bigger double bottom on this 6-month demand, which is then just going to go up? So there's just a lot of factors on a lot of different time frames, and this isn't really helping me. Like often this helps me like judge Bitcoin, but because of this tightness of this PA that we've had over the last few weeks or couple of months, it's become, you know, increasingly hard. So yeah, I'll just finish up on Bitcoin, and then I will answer you in a sec, multisec. So yeah, the summarized version of what I think about Bitcoin is obviously all these structures are still very up. We have a new 3-month demand. We have a new potential flip of a weekly, but it's weak. We have a current very lower time frame flip of a 2-day demand. So like everything's still holding for up at the moment. But we're running risks now of the possibility of a double top at all-time high, of sort of some similarities with the patterns back from 2021 over here. And you know, have we just wicked out, taken out that high, and now we're looking for a bigger drop? So those are the kind of challenges. These are the levels I'm looking at for possible bounces. Again, the risk is, you know, a lot of these, so these are now all going to be weak demand because they haven't taken out the high. It hasn't managed to make a new high. It doesn't mean they won't hold, and it doesn't mean we won't get some sort of, you know, even if it does drop, you know, some sort of at least tradable bounces off each of these, you know, even bigger bounces off each of these zones. Even if that is a macro double top now. And yeah, but so some of the similarities on that double top to Ether and to the 2021 patterns are making me slightly nervous with this. However, all the structures are still pointing to up. And yeah, then the multiple levels on the way down. Again, when we have lots of levels, we can just run through all of them. So it's just care should be taken. Yeah, so that's pretty much it on Bitcoin at the moment. Multisac, what are you saying? I have a tiny amount, like $14, and now I'm thinking Bitcoin is now in a low and it will go up. If you only have $14 left, I think trading Bitcoin is probably the most unwise thing you can do. I would say what you should do is try and find a decent alt, spend time finding a decent alt, and then buy spot. And try and wait for like a significant move that'll double or triple your money. Unless you've got more money coming in at a later date. If you can afford to gamble that 14 and just see what happens, then that's up to you. But if that's all you're going to have left, then oh, somebody else is talking. I can't see. Oh, it's Aussie Man. Hi, Aussie Man. You've made your colour yellow, so now when I've got it on my second screen, it's excruciatingly bright on a white background, so I couldn't see that it was you. Yeah, so then, yeah, so that was kind of basically all this summary on Bitcoin, I think. Multisec, yeah, there's not much more I can say. I will see if we see anything on the alt side, but yeah, I think you really need to be looking at alts more than Bitcoin. I think your risk to reward's better. Your probability of your trade probability will be higher on alts. You're less likely to get wicked out, stopped out. Bitcoin, you could just wait for a swing failure, but I think, you know, if you're looking now on a Friday afternoon when CME may close early today, I'm not sure because it's a public holiday and it's Independence Day in the US, and then we're just going to get sideways weekend PA. I think now you have 13. You think BT? Why do you think BTC? Like, tell me why you think BTC is going to rise again. Like, what is your analysis that's telling you this is going back up from here? On what time frame are you looking? Like, what would be your target if you took this trade? What would be your stop loss? I guess your stop loss is again below today's low, but what is it that's making you think this is going to go up? Because for me, this is I'll agree with you, it's an upward structure, but I don't think it's a very high probability trade to go long now. Hi, Aussie Man. Yeah, so you know, it's up to you. There is some confluence here. Like we have CME has hit the 3-day level. The US dollar pair has come deeper into the 2-day level. We've got Korea's come a lot deeper in the 2-day level, but it's kind of, yeah, I don't know. Like I say, it's not really high probability for me here. So yeah. Okay, so that's BTC. Ether. So I touched on that a little bit before, just with those double tops that we've talked about. So again, for anybody who hasn't seen the start of the stream, how do I think the big beautiful bill will affect me? I've got absolutely no idea, quite frankly. I know very little about it. I don't know what's in it. I only know that Elon arced up about it, and he arced up, I think, because money wasn't going to be funneled to Tesla anymore, which seems about right. I don't know. I don't know enough. I don't even know what the financial press thinks about it. Yeah, I read that it got signed, but I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I need to actually look at what's in it and what impact. I don't know what impact do you think it will have. You tell me. Um, I need to look, yeah, firstly at what the financial press are thinking about it, because I don't know, my economics is there, but it's not strong. And I have to kind of weigh up judgment as to what they think is going to affect, because obviously there's going to be presumably lots of knock-on effects to jobs and inflation and retail and sales and all that sort of stuff. And I don't know, is it cover property? I don't know how much, is it really covering everything? Multisex back. So, okay, where I want to enter, yeah, where do you want to enter and take profit? You tell me. Okay, let me just quickly do Ether while Multisex figuring out. So, yeah, so okay, I've touched on this before. We had local double top here. We then had a larger double top here. We've got the big risk of this being a massive double top here. So always have that in the back of your mind. Supporting that thesis is the fact we have made 3-month supply. This is not last month. This was already in place before the previous quarter. We wicked below, so this is the bear scenario. That we made a 3-month supply. We're rejecting off that now. So given the double top or the lower high, in fact, in the case of this, hi Milana. Given the double top and the lower high and the 3-month supply of it, my bias is more towards the bearish side. The bullish side on the macro is the fact that we have a swing fail here that took out the low. It didn't. I would have preferred this if it had fallen into this 3-month zone here, but it does have a big wick. It doesn't necessarily have to hit the body. That's just my preference for entries because it makes for tighter entries. But I would not be, I see a lot of people longing Ether. That's up to them. Maybe I'm wrong, but for me, I just don't long into 3-month supply. It may or may not work, but for me, my bias is short. And until I see something change, something different, if I look at the monthly, maybe if this monthly candle closes over here and makes a monthly demand, if we get a push up in, where are we, July, then fine, we can maybe flip bias. But still, 3-month supply at the moment for me wins. The swing failure of taking out those lows is good for the bulls. But again, I need to see a bit more to be even remotely bullish on this. Even on the weekly, actually I was looking at the 2-week potential close earlier. So if the 2-week closes with a 2-week demand, then potentially we can look, get back to my drawings, potentially, if this candle closes up here, then potentially you can get a long off the retest. But even then, I'll still only be looking for shorts a bit higher. Until, this 3-month is broken, for me, that's a supply zone and that's for a short entry. Do I play any other games? Do you consider crypto trading a game, or you're not even watching my stream? I think it's probably the more likely answer. I played Candy Crush on my iPad. I'm not sure that counts. I'm not sure that's people would be interested in me streaming Candy Crush. And I also play various numbers games because I'm a bit of a geek. But I don't play any fun games that I can put on. You're on Twitch, I see. That's why. But anyway, okay, so back to Ether. So yeah, my high time frame bias, as everyone knows, has been down for a long time. Obviously, we can go higher in the zone, but so that was my preferred. I had a few possible shorts again. It was one of those scenarios where we had so many options and it just ran a green candle through everything, which is kind of what can happen. Milana, I'll chat to you in a minute. I have to, and Multisec. I'll talk to you in a sec. Let me just finish doing this Ether analysis. Yeah, so I had a few entries that got run through. This was my preferred entry at the start of the 3-month zone. Obviously, it's taken its time. It's pushed up. It's gone up to the next level inside. It's dropped. It picked up a demand there. So again, on this, I have added entries because, I don't want to be, if we're going to have some slow bouncing PA, which is predominantly what we seem to be doing at the moment, at least on Bitcoin, maybe a bit less so on Ether. So Ether, obviously, I commented earlier that we had the risk, when we had weak demand, that we do a wick like that and it just runs straight through the demand. which is my concern on Bitcoin. And this could be the concern here, you know, the 3-month supply. You know, my preference is for that. You know, that's what I consider the higher probability play out on this. But again, whether we get a bounce, you know, tradable bounces throughout and bigger bounces, then I don't know until we get to and hit those zones. And that was exactly what we saw. I'll get to the majors in a minute, but that was exactly what we saw on the majors. You know, in some cases they gave tradable bounces, and in other cases they didn't. But if you're a high time frame trader, don't trade any of these. Wait either for something more in here, or for these 3-month zones, or lower, or the annual zone down at 750. Or you know, at least, but anyone who's trading, trade when you've seen confirmation, trade with the stop loss, all the usual comments. So while Bitcoin flipped this weekly supply back to demand, sorry, I'm just distracted by the chat. I'll come back to it. Yeah, so we've got Bitcoin flipped this weekly by a strong close last week. Ether didn't. So Ether is still in a weekly supply. It's not the best one. It's not very clean. And again, obviously, it's just swing failed. This low didn't really have a significant, it was a decent candle down, but not a really significant close below. Also now got a 2-day demand here. So my lower time frame, again, like if you followed my stream last time, I was looking at 2600 to 2650 because there was some confluence with the CME pair with the 5-day and 2-day supply on CME. So that's obviously come up quite nicely into the circle for the rejection. And now we just need to see what the reaction is here, because if this is reacting, you know, we are still in a kind of uptrend. This could react and go higher, and you know, in the bigger picture, if this is a swing fail at the bottom of the range, you know, then it's possible this also then takes out the high of the range as well. But it already, to some extent, actually, it already has here. So that's high of the range, low of the range, and now we're just back in the middle of the range. So we just need to see a little bit more of what's going to happen for that lower time frame analysis. Higher time frame, like I say, is still down, so I still look for more aggressively for shorts on this than on Bitcoin. Similarly, the ETH-BTC pair, again, made a weekly supply. My preference on this would have been that it had come up into there, but it didn't. It rejected a daily supply just below. But again, my preference for longs is when the BTC pair gets down into here. Left some nice trend line stops in there, so you know, I really do think this should be coming down, at least taking out those stops, and then if we get a higher low, maybe we can reconsider. So Milana just left, so she joined my group and then she left my group. I think she was trying to sell me some advertising or something. Joined my followers and then left my followers. That's what it seems from the stream. What fun! Gotta love streaming. So Multisec now is saying he's not able to see my chart because the quality is very low. Aussie man, is the quality very low for you, or is that a problem for Multisec? Like my stream is for once is saying excellent, so but maybe the if you're on the vertical Multisec. Yeah, you're on the vertical. If you try and switch to my horizontal stream, you might find the quality a bit better. Multisec, because I run streams on both at the same time. Oh, Milana's back. Anyway, so Ether. So yeah, ETHBTC, obviously my preference is still down. Like we had a bounce on this 2-month at the low, so I would like to see a reversal, and that's, you know, that's what we've got potentially in play. But obviously that's, you know, we're talking about a very high time frame reversal, given we've had what 3 years of down on ETHBTC. So since 2022, we've been running completely down. So we don't necessarily expect this to reverse. It can have V-shaped recoveries, but I don't really expect this to reverse in one candle. I would like to see something a little bit more like we had back in 2020 over here. I mean, you know, which at least would normally come down and test that low again before another move up. So that's kind of the preference for ETHBTC. Oh, and Milana left again. Maybe Twitch is just too annoying to have as a stream. Okay, so anyway, back to Ether. So I guess what in summary, yeah, the high time frame bias is down because of the 3-month supply, because of the double top. That's my preference, but they're very, very high time frames, so obviously can get lots of swings in between. Aggressive long entry, if this local range is going to hold, would be on this 8-hour demand at the base. Could hold this 2-day here, but I'm just, on Ether particularly, on Bitcoin maybe is more likely because Bitcoin, at least the structure is slightly stronger, but Ether like this, when it's coming out, hasn't managed to flip anything in this weekly supply. Maybe it's going to hold here, but I prefer this to go back lower. For the bias on the weekly is still down on this. BTC, on the other hand, flipped that weekly, so it could have a temporary long bias, and also has a lot of other demand supporting that, whereas Ether doesn't. So yeah, that's your provisional long entry there. There is a potential long entry on this 5-day here, but again, like this, I would only put this because it coincides with 61 fib. It has trendline stops below it. The chances of it wicking through that are pretty high, but maybe it'll give, a scalp bounce. So that's why I've alerted it as a possibility of getting, some sort of a bounce on top of it. And then similarly at the base here, are we going to get a higher low? But really, in the grand scheme of things, just delete that. In the grand scheme of things, like, I do expect this to play out lower. It's just a question of the time, how long it takes to do that, and how many bounces we may get in it, even if we go higher inside the supply first. Yeah, so that's BTC and Ether. So Multisec, what are you saying? Where do you want to enter and take profit? I don't know. You were supposed to tell me where you're entering. Yes, I am seeing your messages. You were supposed to tell me where you're entering and taking profit. Because I don't think where you're entering now is a high probability trade for Bitcoin. I don't know what time frame you're trading. You're on the 3-minute chart and you're going to take profit in like half an hour. Yes, I am seeing your messages. They were getting lost a little bit in between somebody on Twitch who is messaging a lot, but that person seems to have stopped now, so you might be okay. So Ether on the low time frame, similar to what I said on Bitcoin, okay, we've already talked about, we're just hitting this 2-day demand now. Similar to what I said on Bitcoin, above is a little challenging unless you're back for the real low time frame. How do you trade short-term bounces? You wait for a wick in the area and put a stop below. Yes, potentially. I mean, really, I'll show you in a minute. Actually, I can show you as part of this. So what I would do. So I do have a whole video on this. I don't know if you've watched my educational videos, Aussie Man, but I mean, so I did a whole video on this like about 6 months ago, on potential entry strategies. That's really up to you, depending on how much time you have, how much energy you want to put into it, how much you care, like what your risk appetite is, all that sort of stuff. Hold on, I'm just getting a stream error now. Let's see what's going on with that. My stream's bitrate is higher than the recommended. Normally it says it's lower, so I don't really know what that means. Anyway, we'll carry on and hope for the best. Yeah, so yeah, there's a whole video on this anyway, but what I would do is I kind of go, okay, so here we've hit this major area. I had this sort of dodgy looking circle for this possible entry here. It was confluence here we had with the 3-month level, and then there was also, I think, can't remember, maybe a 30-minute supply or something in here that complement with that 3-month level. It was complement also, I think, with some levels on, yes, this Ether was confluent with I was looking at 26 and 2600 because it hit the 5-day and then the 2-day supply on the CME pair. So 2600 and 2650 were the two levels I was looking at. So I looked for that confluence. Yeah, don't forget because they'll help you. They should. I mean, I know they're long and it's time consuming, but then I know it's educational, so it should be. But I've got a whole, so with the Ripple top, when we like the Ripple, the real recent very high top, I did a whole play-by-play for like an hour at the end of that video. So the first half is kind of just all the different entry strategies. Hi, Mr. Blessed. And then there's the second half was a whole play-by-play, playing all the bars forward. I think there was some level of bias because I was doing it, I think, after the fact. But how you could potentially be viewing entries and how to add. So, for example, on this, like if you were going, okay, you were looking at this 2600 and 2650, you could go, okay, provisionally, I'm not here to look at the computer. I'll put a couple of entries there with low risk with a very wide stop. So maybe you put your stop, at least above this high or even significantly higher, just so you get some skin in the game, like when the very first hit goes. I wouldn't generally recommend doing that on Bitcoin because Bitcoin can overshoot or has recently been overshooting quite a lot. Ether is more viable to do that. So again, assess your pair. But then you can get some skin in the game, but then you're just watching it. Then, and you see that for the most part, like occasionally you get things like this where it really just falls off a cliff. But for the most part, when you look at tops or bottoms, you'll get, a push, another push, 3 pushes, in this case, 4 pushes to the high. And then sometimes it doesn't give you re-entries, but you can just say you're not going to take those trades if you don't get re-entries. So what you're looking for is going, okay, we've hit the zone now. Let me just hide the drawings for a minute. So here, it hits the zone here. And at this point in time, it drops. So it gives you that initial reaction, but it made a 2-hour supply here, but it's very early. So you might kind of go, okay, it's a bit too early. It's not the best 2-hour supply because it hasn't closed below. You can look at confluence with what Bitcoin's doing, etc. But if you actually then wait, so this then, it comes up and takes out the high. That's really what you want at least one time, taking out the high, and quite often you get 2. Again, not always. Like here, for example, it didn't come and take the high, but you want at least one more push. If you're in an uptrend, you want to try and take a second, see what happens on the second go at the high. And if the second go at the high can't get significantly higher, then you start looking for shorts. Now, in a perfect world, this red candle would have broken demand, and that would have been a much better short. So then you're looking more like a head and shoulders. So you've got your high, it makes a new high. This then breaks that low, and then that's a much more high probability short. But at this point in time, it made a 2-day supply in here. I'm just not drawing properly now. Back up my stream. So at this point, once it fell down below, it then made a 2-hour supply. So at that point, you can then, at what point do you want to start taking risk, I guess? At what point, what's your confidence like? You start looking at the rest of the market, like I say, at Bitcoin, at confluence with that, and in this case, Bitcoin had the exact same 2-hour supply. Then you can just enter here with your stop, and then you get a much tighter risk to reward. Or even at that point, if you'd entered here and, say midway up there, say you had 3 entries and 2 of those 3 had hit with that really wide stop, you could then potentially bring that stop down to here, add a bit more to it once it's made supply, and then wait for another drop. Then now at this point in time, delete everything again, we've now got a new 8-hour supply. So again, if you're ignore demand for the moment, because obviously there's some risk involved with this now because we've hit 2-day demand. But let's say you don't think it's going to bounce here particularly strongly, or you can just watch. I mean, it doesn't really matter if it has hit the 2-day demand here, but we're looking now for a retest up into here. Sorry, click that away by mistake. So we're looking for a retest up into here. And then again, if you want, you can take a blind short in there. You just short here, see if you get a drop, stop either just above the 8-hour, just above that high, and your level of confidence, keep it further away if you're less confident, because then you can at least bring it in and try and add a bit to the trade. It gives you more space to manipulate and to manage your trade, not manipulate, but manage your trade. But a lot of this just depends on how much time you have involved, and this is why I tend to be reluctant to give like really firm entries and things like that. And so yeah, that's kind of an example of how you can enter and then add to it, and that's if you think this trade, if you're playing this as a right, this is rejecting the 3-month supply, your target is $700, then you start adding in little bits. Then if we break this 2-day supply, this comes all the way through here, then you can potentially look for a short on a retest of that, and you can add to the trade. Most of the time, because obviously that we have a huge amount of bouncing around, I would suggest, if you've taken that original trade, that you should be taking some profit here, and then you add back if it does it again, and then at some point maybe you're wrong and it goes up, and then you get stopped out entirely, but you have taken some profit originally, and then you wait again, and then you look for the next level that you're looking for the bigger short. And exactly the same applies to the long side, and it's why I always say you should always trade in both directions, and that every chart you see of mine has short, long, short, failed long, long, failed short, mini short, decent short, like you're looking constantly. And the other thing you can do, obviously, you can choose. So this is a 2-hour time frame example that I gave, and then with the follow up on the 8-hour. But in some cases, you're going to get, when in New York particularly, you'll get a lot more volatility and a lot quicker moves. So you can look at the 15-minute charts and things like that. So here we had consolidation and manipulation, broke back above, comes back and tests that level, and this actually ended up as an hourly anyway. And that's your bigger move. So the structures are hard because they're all going to be different in every situation. But at a minimum, you should be looking at where's your nearest supply or demand if you're shorting, and when that's broken. So always think in terms of wave, that it comes down, retests, comes down, retests, comes down. And that's why I say you wait for the final push that's kind of failed to make a significant low. You can see momentum's dying here already. It's a strong drop, retrace, less strong drop, retrace, weaker drop, and now has pushed back through, and hence you broke structure, so you're looking for that long entry. And you can do that on a 1-minute chart if you want, but obviously your odds are going to be, it's going to be a lot choppier, and your odds are going to be much lower if you start looking at 1-minute charts. So I hope that's helpful. Yeah, final thoughts on Ether, I think, just because I didn't fully cover that, is that again, like Bitcoin, there was 3 entries in here. There's a sort of the 8-hour at the open of that candle. Like, I'd prefer this to be at the 61 fibs, so I really want to see where the bottom is before thinking about that. If it comes down into here, 61 fibs is going to be better for that lower arrow, but if we bounce kind of more like now or sooner, then perhaps the 61 is going to be a bit higher. So we've got an 8-hour supply, we've got an untested 1 hour inside it. Kind of come close to testing that, but that's possible rejection level if it comes back up there. And then there's also a couple of untested 5 minutes all the way up at the top if we go up there. But again, this is why I've been reluctant to do sort of the really low time frame. No worries, Aussie man. That's why I've been reluctant to do the low time frame stuff recently, because we're getting such big moves, and also we are getting generally a significant amount of time on the time frame, on the at least the mid time frames, to actually make a decision of whether you're going to enter or not. And then you look at Ether and Bitcoin, now, I mean, this is just a messy shit show, quite frankly. So hence why I'm a bit reluctant. Anyway, that's my alarm going. What else? Oh, excuse me. Good afternoon to my widgets on Microsoft. Can you go away now? I hate this like hover and then it pops out on your screen. Now I can't get rid of it. Go away. Somebody have any hints of how to get rid of this? Oh, it's gone. Okay. Back to concept of momentum you talked about is from Urban Forex course. Yeah, well, he talks about the rubber band man, but yeah, essentially it's momentum, and a number of, even old school TA talks about that. Yeah, he talks about rubber band man, which I think is quite a good kind of analogy, that you move up and you pull back and it pings you back, and it's like, how hard is it pinging you back? The only thing I've got kind of against that, so, and it's also like what I was talking about earlier with this Elliot wave, or not the Elliot wave stuff, like an impulse wave versus a corrective wave. So an impulse wave is strong move up, strong correction, but makes holds the breakout level, but then a move like this is corrective by Elliot waves terms, and i.e. the momentum is slow. So I mean, even Elliot wave, against the Elliot wave definition of a corrective wave is essentially slow momentum. And that's also the RSI. So, if you looked at the RSI, you would see a very sort of sideways weak RSI in that case. But yeah, I quite like the rubber band man analogy from the Urban Forex course. I haven't looked at him for a while. I wonder what he's doing these days, if he's got any new content. One of the very early things that I studied. But yeah, so that's what I was going to say. The other problem I have a little bit with that, and I don't know, I need to think about it in the context of crypto, but I don't love it. Even there's another group that I follow called We Trade Waves. Hold on a sec. I'm using my voice a little. There's another group I follow called We Trade Waves, who do a webinar every Sunday. And he'll say things like, if this move is corrective, and it's much more to do with FX. So let's try and have a look. But like, for example, here, he'll say, oh, there's strong momentum for the move down. Do I recommend learning Elliot wave concepts? I haven't. I started. I've read chunks of the book on it, but for me, no. Other people would completely disagree with me, so it's a question whether you take my opinion or not. If you've learned everything else, then why not if you have time? For me, there aren't enough hours in the day. The problem I have with Elliot Waves is every single person I've seen use them, while I've seen some who are better than others, they're virtually always, they have like 15 different scenarios, much the same as I do for supply and demand. But it's very much like, I think it helps them go, I think it's going to do this, but for me, it wouldn't have added anything over the supply and demand scenario because I could add, A, B, C, D, E's into my, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5s, but does it really add any value other than me just drawing a line going, I think it's going to do this? I also think the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I like the concept of impulse and correction, but the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I mean, look at gold. Like, you want to try and count 5 waves in that or 300. Like, I haven't really seen much that's useful. So I use Elliot Waves only from a very basic perspective. Like, if you do have, and this guy I follow who does FX at the weekends, actually, he does. Like, so if you do have like a clearer, I'm not sure if this is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What I do is I would, at this point, if I can see a clear 5, I then become reluctant to take short re-entries. But whether I assume that a 5 down is now going to be followed by an ABC up, or in this case a major reversal, no. But I don't know. I mean, people who love it would. I don't know if you follow Credible Crypto because he does a lot with that. He seems to think it's very useful. I just thought the corrections, it just seemed over the top. And it was a little bit when I learned harmonics. Like, I quite liked the idea of having, the maths involved and the Fibonacci's and Gartley's, and if you have a strong wave that's to this fib and then you have a shallow correction, and again it's just the concept of how much you're correcting and how much of the retracement. But then once you start looking at harmonics, the original Scott Carney books have, I don't know, 6, 10 of them. But if you start looking into it, then there's a whole host of other people who've added 8,000 new ones. So like, I then became completely overwhelmed with how many different possible harmonics there are, and then it became not very useful. So kind of all this stuff for me, is really peripheral to supply and demand, because I'm kind of going, maybe, I don't know. I mean, I suppose arguably maybe it would help me if I knew, this is hitting like this is a 6-month supply. I don't know if that was 6 months at that time. Here, if I know that, then I don't know, maybe I can be more clear that this is an impulse of 1 and 2, and then there's an annual level down here, let's say, and we're going to go all the way down there. Like, maybe there would be maybe it would help, I don't know. But for me, the time involved in studying and learning it is not enough for me to spend time on at the moment, given there aren't enough hours in the day. If you have hours in the day, why not? But anyway, what was I going to say? Oh, you were talking about the momentum thing. Yeah, that was what I was going to say. So again, like, yeah, the momentum thing I don't necessarily think is that useful. So let's take the dollar here. You've got strong momentum down here. You've got strong momentum up here. Both of those have had equally strong momentum reversing it, and a proper reversal, a decent reversal here, decent reversal. So to then kind of go, oh, this is strong momentum, don't counter trade it, I don't think it's a good argument. But again, what I do look at, and also similar like this, this at the moment, and We Trade Waves will say this as well. He'll be like, oh, this looks weak and corrective. And he's right, it does for now. It might make you more wary of longing, but I can equally see this resolve into a giant green candle if it wants to. Like, I don't think that because it's weak and corrective, it means it's going down. So the rubber band man and the momentum thing is, I don't think necessarily that valuable. But as I said, like here, and again, you can probably see similar arguments here. This was very weak momentum, but then it sort of resolved into strong momentum, and this is intraday, this is New York, so this is not, again, to compare Asia to New York, you're going to get weak momentum in Asia and strong momentum in New York pretty much all the time anyway. So again, you have to just kind of moderate when you're hearing these things. Here, it would have looked like weak momentum, a weak bounce, maybe a decent bounce, but then followed by weak follow-up, but oh, suddenly it breaks out. So it's a little bit careful. So like, really, I'd use those comments on the lower time frames like I did when I was talking about this, that I'm kind of going, okay, we're dropping, you can see. And if you just sit there being patient, I think so many people fail because they're not patient. Like, I know a couple of my group shorted straight when this hit here. I have no idea when they took profit. They know what they're doing, so it doesn't matter. Like, that's fine. But you can see really you had, so when was this? This was Wednesday at 8 p.m. Thursday at 2 p.m, so almost 24 hours later, not quite, it made a new high. Then Thursday at 9 p.m, so it was 24 hours later, you had to decide if you wanted to take this short or not. But I think people are so super keen to leap in. They then sit there panicking, half underwater. Oh, I'm a profit, panicking, wrecking with their psychology because they're using 2 type stops. Um, and sure, if you wait, sometimes you're going to miss stuff. Like, if you'd waited here, maybe you would have missed it because it did kind of slowly come down and then just bounce really hard. But again, you have to pick what you're willing to do, what you're willing to accept, and all that sort of stuff with momentum and that's why I say, watch my video on the strategies, because there are so many. Like here, for example, you also had a trend line break strategy in there. So you could have done it didn't make a break of structure, so the break of structure wouldn't have worked, but the new supply would have worked. So weaker strategy, but that strategy would have worked. So for that short of the 2 hour, then you could go, I'm going to add to it if we break that trend line. And maybe you just add immediately, but then you've got to decide where you're going to put your stop and what's acceptable to you, and how much you're going to risk, how much you want to add, So it's very, very much up to each individual how they're going to manage those trades. Hope that helps. So just back to the crypto cap charts, and again, I think these are not going to give me much more than what the majors will give either. Actually, I swear I updated that. Maybe I didn't. The majors. So what we had on most of the majors, and you see on these tight structures, is that we had a 3-day demand was made. I think then when we went up, we then closed back below. Then we made a 2-day supply. Then we managed to go straight back through that. So the majors and all this have been really chopping around. No worries. The majors have really been chopping around in this sort of area, so it's been hard. This is obviously looking a lot stronger than a lot of the majors, but yeah, so similar to Bitcoin and Ether, total 2, they've all got this kind of tight 2-day demand that's been made as a 3-day underneath. In some cases they ran through the 3-day. Let me just see if there's anything new on these. So it's got a 3-day. I've drawn these 3 days quite large actually. You can argue that it should be just to the bottom of this wick, but just because they're so messy. So again, just messy chop here. And for the most part, like as most people know, like my preference again is for lower on this. I may or may not get it. Trading in here now, like that was the entry for longs on alts. If you didn't get that, now you're trading, it's becoming harder, and I can see that with my alerts. Like all my alerts that kind of went this time all worked. They're all kind of up somewhere to some level, greater or lesser degree, depending on the strength of the alt. But now trying to take longs, I'm finding it's becoming a little more 50-50, and the shorts are working a little bit better. Others obviously is much more sideways than the others. Again, got that bounce there, looking for a run up into there, but could very equally see a drop off down into here. So I'm very, very wary. ETH DeFi I think was a bit nastier. No, ETH DeFi is just sort of similar to, so everything's just kind of similar, and it's just in this very, very tight range. Totally 100. I can't remember what I was trying to demonstrate with that line, but I think that was just the sort of the bare scenario that I wasn't sure. So all overarchingly on these charts, they're all rejecting, I think, except for others like monthly and weekly supplies at the high. I think others is weaker. It was only rejected a daily or something kind of in the middle of this drop. We've come down to here. There is a possibility of making a higher low, going higher in this 3-month zone, rejecting from there, or is there an equal possibility of what I think I was demonstrating with this line, that we just go up a little bit and fall off a cliff? So it's that kind of indecision that I'm in at the moment, and the PA just isn't really. If I see anything definitive, I will share, but at the moment I'm just not seeing anything definitive on this. I just see this very, very tight little range. BTC dominance. I should say actually, so that obviously on, just to cover, so on total, we did obviously make this 3-month demand. A lot of these had 2 months demand. So even on Bitcoin, they already had a 2-month demand. Let's hide everything so you can see. So it already had a 2-month, and that now the 3-month is closed, is now sort of converted into a 3-month. So Bitcoin already tested the 2-month. So that's my other kind of reticence if Bitcoin comes back. We're also in this monthly supply. So again, I'm just there. It's too much, it's too messy. So weak 3-month, 2-month demand, I don't want to trade against that. But then do I want to trade long in a monthly supply off a lower high? Not really either. So yeah, that's kind of, and all, I think all of these pretty much look like that. Others is like the more bearish one, because others already had a 3-month supply and it closed very slightly below. But yeah, so the reason I said that is because, yeah, BTC dominance, obviously this did make a monthly demand, it's pushing higher, it's in a 6-month supply, it's hit a 2 month inside the 6 months, so, but obviously this isn't showing any signs of falling down at the moment. Ether dominance, there was no new monthly, retesting 2-week supply, again, like the ETHBTC pair, would like this lower. Others dominance, if you've been following me, you know I was looking for that rejection there, or ideally a push up into here for more confidence on shorting the alt market. I don't really want to be excited about the alt market until we at least get down into here, and it doesn't necessarily have to stop there, it can still go lower, but this for me is floating in the middle of nowhere for longs. So I don't see, yeah. And similarly here, so this, I kind of deleted the weekly, I think it was a 2-week demand from this black line up here. Just deleted it so I could see what I was doing, but there is now a 3-week a little bit lower in there, and failing that, you know, there's a really big drop that can happen on these if they want to. But again, could hold here, but it's made a monthly supply immediately above the price, and that's like really, these things are making me quite nervous for the alt market. And then finally, total E100 dominance. The new thing I'm looking at again is just dipping into this 2-week demand down here. So I really need this to kind of pick up its game pretty quickly. But like nothing in none of these for me really point to alt season. You know, potentially, yes, we've got dominances in demands, but until we start seeing that move or some sort of strength off the demand, and you've got to hope that you then don't miss it. But certainly what I don't like to see is things to make monthly supplies. That one didn't, but you know, only by a hair. But this closed, the total DeFi dominance closed below that monthly level, and it's tapped into that level, but that is not a scenario that I want to long into. Others dominance didn't do that, so it was just total DeFi dominance in that case. But what we'll see that on a lot of the majors. So anyway, go back onto the majors. I have added a few new entries now. That's what's the best thing to start on. So BNB. Actually, I'm not supposed to be able to start on the old majors. So TRX. As you know, I was looking for a short in this daily if it already had a wick all the way through this zone, so I said it could run up inside and could even run up to the 4-hour, and it's still, you know, TRX is still very bullish, but that was kind of a possible short, and it's run a bit higher, but see what happens off this zone. I also got front run off a lot of stuff over yesterday, which is kind of annoying, but it is what it is. BCH, we also had that short entry on 5-day supply. That took it a bit of time, but had a nice reaction. That's now come down into a 3-day demand. So this was an aggressive long entry I had. It's had a little bit of a bounce earlier today, and we'll see. I've thrown in another short there just to see, you know, if we can get some nice like mini swings in here. We'll just see what happens. It's also got a new 3-month demand down there, so that would be the kind of more interesting level to watch on BCH if we get down there. And again, just be conscious, 3-month demand is not just that cross, it's this. So, and there is a lot of chop, so that's the only thing I don't like about BCH is all this chop. But certainly watch that level to see if you get a reaction, because that could be a very significant reaction if the market's okay and it all holds from here. But until then, potentially, you know, maybe we're going to get a bounce up into there, and then we can trade that. There's a weekly demand here as well. So again, BCH is the only problem with BCH is there's been so much chop on the way up. And this is my issue when I say, you know, things are looking corrective as well. Like this is really not exactly, you know, you compare that to this is not strong. And the risk you've got when that is not strong is that it does this. And it can still, you know, respect the 3-month demand and come all the way to the bottom if it wants. And BCH has done that once before, actually, at the lows, and it really threw me and annoyed me. Can't remember when exactly it was. It must have been here. No, it was no, I can't remember. I won't search for it. It might even have been all the way back here. I'm not sure, but I think it had a large or 6-month or 3-month, yeah, but it would have been here. It had this massive 3-month demand. I think I was watching for ages to kind of go, okay, it's got a 6-month demand, it's got a 6-month demand, or a yearly or something, and it literally came to within a hair of the bottom before. And I'd kind of forgotten about it then, which is frustrating. But yeah, BCH certainly keep an eye on, because, you know, if it does hold this, if the market's ready, if it holds this monthly, 3-monthly level, then it could get a significant move. TRX also it had a 2-week demand here already, and it's also got a monthly. I think that might actually even be a 2-monthly. So the old majors are a bit more bullish. Let's see if that's a 3-month or a 2-month. 2 months. And it's also a 3-month. So this done. Update my chart quickly. Oh no, I just made it 6 months as well. Ooh. Some of the overlapping zones can be quite annoying. So yeah, this is now a 3-month demand. Yeah, so to have put that in the comment anyway. So again, I've alerted this very solid long entry for TRX possibility if it comes back down here. Again, bear in mind it's a bigger zone. And okay, so this is the problem. So we've got BCH and TRX are obviously on the bull side. We've got major demand similar to Bitcoin. Again, exactly the same scenario as Bitcoin. The problem is they are weak. So because this is your last down move, this is the correction. So yes, we've had 3 months of consolidation. That's good. There's 3 months of demand going on in here. We've moved up outside of this area, hence creating, confirming the demand. But it's not exactly a significant move away from the 3 months demand, and it certainly is nowhere near in this case from taking out that high. So that's the kind of problem we've got with this. And similarly, again, zones underneath that haven't been tested. God, I was looking at BCH, but this is TRX. So yes, I will 100%. As far as like the majors go, most of them are looking so horribly weak. It would only be TRX and BCH, I think, probably the only two, maybe BNB, that you could be more confident of longs on. But however, be conscious that this is a 3-month and it's weak, and that if it wants, it can not bounce and it can go back through to proper demand down here because it never really got a test. You can still have an ABC wave. So if you're asking about Elliot waves before, so that's kind of minor things that I look at when I talk about Elliot waves. In my limited knowledge, I don't try and count WXYZs and all that malarkey and complex corrections and things like that because I don't think it's worth my time. But the absolute simple thing that you should be aware of, because it's fundamental in all the psychology of traders as well, is you have a strong move up, you have a retracement, an A wave, you have this B wave. This B wave is when all the retail traders who missed out here, who have read about TRX in the newspaper or seen it with their mates, or everyone's like, buy TRX, they all jump in here and then they get killed when you get the C wave. So that's my worry about this. And then also, and the other thing that's very apparent, like I say, is the weakness. So really, if this is looking very corrective, my concern is, again, that it's just going to run straight back through. However, again, like I say, in its defense, it's made a 3-month demand. It's held up here for a really long time of accumulation. So you should certainly be looking for that, even if it only gets to even if we're still doing an A, but a higher B and then a C, with an A, B, C in the middle of it. And again, trading both directions as always. And yeah, so BCH is pretty much the same scenario. Actually, in fact, BCH is a sort of a much bigger potential correction. So this is a good example of that's the A. It will move up, then the A. This had a very strong B, but then C still came down and take out the low. This is still weak demand because it didn't manage to take out the high. It only stopped, didn't manage to take out this high. So again, that's why I kind of try and define strong and weak demand. I would still alert here. It is still possible we get a bounce here. In this case, maybe actually, no, I think it did just take out that low. Maybe it was an equal bottom there, but it can still give you something tradable off here. But this was a weak demand because this high didn't break that high. So then it came back down into proper demand. And certainly if you have zones like this, if you have zones which haven't been tested, if you have a low, like what might be a B wave, an A wave, you have a B wave and it's coming back down again. If you have a zone underneath the A's low that hasn't been tested, then you should be even more careful about trading those, trading for the higher low. And that's my concern on the TRX example. TRX bounced here in a weekly demand, but it hasn't really, like my preference would have been to come back into this, the 2-month demand down there or a 2-week demand, like testing this breakout. That way, the logical kind of move for TRX is really probably going to be like this. And then, you can potentially fib this up move, where's the 61, then you've got this whole up move to contend with, maybe it'll even come down here where the annual is. But that's really a very shallow, like if you look at the big picture of TRX, this is a very shallow correction. Sorry, I've overdrawn that, but it's even a very shallow correction compared to kind of what it could be and the up move that we've had. You know, same here. You can see from A, B, C. This C did make a higher low, gave you like a D, and then but then dropped a bit lower. Still, eventually held this zone, but we still had that longer correction. It is quite uncommon to have a second up move, and again, this is what you'll see most of CT have problems with, and that you should definitely be aware of. That your CT will commonly say this is going to like $8, and they're saying it all at the moment actually. But again, the chances of this going to sort of, you know, well, $8 is an exaggeration, but even $1, that it might, the chances of it going to $1 from here are much lower for me than the chances of it doing a wave down before it goes to $1. And you'll see that in all these corrections, and that is one of the fundamental things in Elliot Waves is the ABC. Like that's the first thing you learn, and that is the thing I primarily kind of bring into my trading. So bit more detail there than I wanted. And then, yeah, so then with the rest of Elliot Waves, actually finishing the rest of the question is, again, just the complexity. Once it starts to, it's done the ABC and then it start to move up, and this is a bit I find hard. It's like, well, is this a move up for the next move, for the next impulse, or is this a DE, or, you know, corrections then become super complicated. And I think you can spend so much time, and, you know, I'm charting 800 things. I haven't got time to do Elliot Wave analysis on all of them or any of them. So for me, I'd much rather go, you know, what I'm doing here. Okay, BCH has made a new 3-month demand. There's a yearly level at the same level. I'm going to alert that because I think there's a chance there'll be a reaction there. If the reaction then looks good, then I'll start following it. So, you know, I've hidden all my previous alerts on these now, but let's look at BCH, for example. I re-show where my alerts were. That, you know, we had early longs, got little bounces here, short, long in there, long at the bottom, then 2 shorts to get that swing. Then I was starting to really kind of go, okay, this is looking more bullish now. So 2 longs in there. It was, again, more shorts, didn't retrace as much as I would like, I think, at this point. A couple of a bit aggressive longs in there, came down a little bit lower, a little bit too aggressive on the shorting there, but then a nice long re-entry, a nice long re-entry, and then up into a short. So again, like, don't be so set on, you know, if you want to think you can buy that bottom, and yeah, I can, you know, I can bring this up back in, you know, 2027 and say, oh, look, I bought the bottom there, but I'm, you know, I want to be transparent, you know, I'm not in like so much of CT going buy this bottom and then they buy this bottom and then they'll bring out the final bottom that they did actually call correctly. I'm trying to get better at that, but for me, it's just like try and buy bounces on significant zones, get out at least half the position. In some cases, you can judge it and say if you can think you're going to hold, but I think since 2022, we haven't been in an all-season kind of scenario. I don't think you should hold anything. I think you can consider things that are on major monthly demand or yearly demand. But even then, you know, the chances of it coming back lower inside, you know, these entries probably would have been on monthlies or something to start with, but it's still come a lot deeper before we've had a decent move. And then it's also taken 4 months to do that. So depends how you want to deploy your capital. But unless you're an investor, I think trading, if you're trading, you should trade. Nobody watching at the moment, I don't think. Let me just see if there's anybody around. Okay, so anyway, I digressed a little bit too much there, but just quickly again on the majors to update the majors. So the old majors talked about, we've got a new 3-month demand on TRX and a new 3-month demand on BCH. So those are the 2 I'd be looking for long entries on if we revisit. The risk on both of those is their weak demand, and a lot of the rest of the market has supply. So whether they've got enough to go independently, I don't know. And they both also do have the possibility of being in a B wave, and thus the C wave can go deeper in the demand or take out the low still. But they're the ones I would be more confident of taking longs on. LTC, I had a short entry that I put in on this 8-hour supply, so that's kind of been pretty nice. And again, I'm just indecisive on this. It didn't really make any new monthly, 3-monthly supply and demand, so there's nothing really to add on that. It's just looking at little swings as and when they hit. XRP did make a monthly demand, and this one is a bit tough because it was very close to price, but again, I don't want to trade against it. You can see this candle just closed slightly above there, but just watch this to see if we're going to get a bit of consolidation through here. It's like, it's not a good monthly demand, but it's not something you should be shorting into. So keep an eye on that to see if it gets filled up. I did have a short on the 3-day supply up there. I'm not sure. I think I might want to delete that now. Yeah, I think I'm going to delete. No, I'll keep it there because like this is weak enough demand for me to be a bit dubious on it. But anyway, those are the entries on XRP. If we come back, put up there, there's a possibility of the 3-day supply. The risk on that is that we're coming off monthly demand. Ideally, we're going to get a big move up there. And then if we fall again, there's another, I think, 8 or 12 hour down there, but this is just for local swings. Yeah, so that's the old majors. Summary at the end there. New majors. We've got BNB made a new 3-monthly demand down here. Sorry, BNB already had a monthly demand, so it hasn't got anything new on it actually. So we already had that test on the monthly demand there, so I kind of want to be more bullish on this, but it is coming back up into 3-weekly supply. I was looking, I think per the last video, I was looking for a swing failure over this level, which it did give, but it then came straight back down into daily demand before pushing a little bit higher again. So again, there's not really much I want to do on BNB at the moment. Like if you've got that long on that monthly, great. Just see where it goes. Link, ADA, and Doggy, unfortunately, these are the ones, so this whole layout were the ones I was super bullish on previously because they were all in 6-month and annual demands. However, unfortunately, they've all now kind of flipped, or at least potentially flipped again weekly, so it's hard to judge. Link, for example, let me just hide my drawing so you can see, it's made a 6-month supply. So, and unfortunately, also what all of these have done is slightly front run my alerts yesterday. So yeah, if you watch the BTC analysis a minute ago, you would see that I thought that maybe we could get another push, a little push higher at the weekend potentially for the US dollar pair to take out the high, for Korea to get into supply. So if we do get another push on these, I think it's worth watching these alerts as they come in. So there's a 6-month supply here. Obviously, it's huge zone, so these are difficult because obviously it can go all the way up in the zone, but you should just watch the level to see if there's an instant reaction. Hopefully, I haven't been front run with that instant reaction, but if I have, then I'll sort of look for follow up. But again, like this does not make me, sadly, doesn't make me bullish on Link anymore. It was actually barely made a yearly here. So it had the 6-month demand having closed this candle above there, but unfortunately it's flicked it back. So like I say, it's weak. And yeah, we need to see. It also closed with a monthly supply in here, again weak because it didn't close below that wick. So yeah, like I say, hopefully it hasn't front run that level. Still holding a monthly here, but at this point, I probably want longs back down there. Unfortunately, so I think yeah, it's worth looking for shorts on this. If we get that tap up into there, and then if we move higher, there's other zones obviously higher inside the 6-month. Excuse me. Doggy, again, like I had hopes for this because we were in annual demand. Back again to it being a weak annual demand. It hasn't closed over that high, but it did close a good strong candle, but you really would have liked to have seen a good strong reaction straight off the top of this zone. So, it is holding. It does have a 6-month untested level at the base here, which is what kind of maybe we could be heading for. And again, now my concern on this, we already had a monthly supply up here, which didn't get tested. A lot of the alts tested up here, but this doggy didn't actually get very high at all. And it's now closed just below this level and again made a new monthly supply. I didn't have an alert, so my alert was on a 5-day inside that because I still think it's worth looking for aggressive shorts just to potentially get into 1 or 2. Yeah, then we'll see what happens, but again, I didn't get back up for my short entry as yet. And it's difficult. So for structurally on this, we have had a wave up, I've got another wave up, we'll retrace. Is this going to do just another wave up from just a structural perspective? But with the supply and demand, like when we make a monthly again right at price, it makes it at least I'd like to see this reaction take out that low, if not that low, maybe coming back down into here. Similar to here, that we had a monthly, it closed a little bit below, a little bit stronger than that close. In fact, it did take out the low on the wick, wicked up into it the following month, and then dropped before reversing later. So again, can't be bullish on doggy at this point, unfortunately. Yeah, now dropping back down. And ADA exactly the same, also rather annoyingly slightly front run. So again, I had made a new 2-month supply on this. So it's coming off 6-month demand. Just can show without the pictures. So again, 6-month demand, not a strong one, stronger than some of the others, but again, structurally, is this just a corrective move? So again, I've talked a lot about this, ABC. So we've got this one move up here. Do we have is this an A, B, C? And unfortunately, I was hoping that wasn't going to be the case. I was hoping we were going to get triangle corrections, and we still might, it still could bounce at this green cross. Because, so I was hoping for that triangle because we had this 6-month demand put in here. But now we put in 2-month supply above. It's making me slightly more skeptical about that. So yeah, again, if we get another push higher on this, I think worth looking for the aggressive short. So on all of these, basically, the aggressive short is on the open of that large zone, but be conscious it is a large zone, and that most of these have zones higher inside that haven't been tested. I forget that on ADA, but probably this 5-day up here. I don't like when we have these gaps when they haven't tested. So it is possible, that maybe it's possible that gets a small reaction, but then we go back. So again, just because it rejects here, if we get a rejection, don't necessarily think it's going to immediately fall all the way down there, but that's kind of what you're hoping for, but manage your risk accordingly. So yeah, Doggy's basically the same. In fact, Doggy's already come off that monthly supply, but had this 5-day in here and another 5-day up there that hasn't been tested, not to mention not having tested the monthly up there. And again, this is the challenge in all of these is the higher low as well. So I think Link, yeah, with the exception of ADA, which did take out the prior low, but Doggy, for example, this is still a higher low. So again, a higher low, but monthly supply immediately above, and a lot of it, so you can see it's very conflicting kind of analysis, very conflicting, sorry, not analysis, but conflicting TA at the moment. And then finally, Dot, Atom, Near, and Sol. So I think Sol didn't make any new supply, I believe. So Sol already had a possible short for this weekly supply in here. And it's obviously come off that. It came down to the 3-day, bounced back up inside it, but it's coming back down. So the next entry I'd look for on Sol is kind of down here. Maybe it'll make a higher low, but cross that bridge when we come to it. But what the rest of the market's doing, I'm not confident of putting higher low entries in anymore. I think the only one actually probably didn't comment on, the only one I had was on BNB, I think, at the moment. Because BNB came off this monthly demand down here, I thought it was worth looking for a higher low. I previously had one on Link, but I've now deleted it. So yeah, Sol, again, we'll look for the entry down here if we get it. Possibly it'll get a higher low in there, but again, we'll see. And also, yeah, the only other thing on Sol is that we have this monthly zone up here. I look at the alert went for the high of this wick, but it didn't quite hit the level. So we shall, yeah, if we go back up there, you're potentially looking for a swing failure over that high. Near I still want to be bullish on, but it's hard with what everything else is looking like. So Near is in a 3-month demand here, and it's had a couple of taps into it. It's got a 2-month supply up there. It didn't make any new monthly, but it did have everything. It made a 3-week supply last week, and it did have that, and that's what it's rejecting off now. So again, slightly front run my alert, a 5-day supply inside the 3-week. But this is one I would like to be potentially more bullish on this, but the BTC pair still looks horrible. But this is kind of the only one that really didn't have as significant supply as anything else. DOT has a new, actually just double check that on there quickly. Yeah, no, it didn't. DOT has a new 1-month and 2-month supply up here. So I put an alert up there. This is further away than Doggy and Link were, but again, it's good to have them staggered a little bit. Just so you don't want to get front run. This obviously now is starting to look, so we're in kind of the last hurrah 3-day demand for the point of if this is going to reverse, but it really needs to get back up over this orange level, really back past here for me to have any confidence in this, because for now it's really just looking like a breakdown below this level of support. And is this demand going to be strong enough to propel it up through here? Who knows, but I'm not overly confident. But yeah, and you can keep an eye on this because at least this is the one that's a clean new demand. So if it could run, if the whole market wants to run, this might be a decent one. But for now, I would be looking for shorts if we get back into this 1-month, 2-month supply level. There's a 2-day, 4-day in there, and then there's a 1-month here, and a 2-month right there. And yeah, then finally Atom. So Atom again, another one annoyingly just slightly front run my level. So this also made a monthly supply. As you know, I've been bearish on Atom for a while and was just sort of struggling to get into shorts on it, but was really thinking this was going to break down. So yeah, there's that monthly level. It's just slightly front run. Is it at the monthly? Hold on. 1 month supply. What's that one? Oh, the 3 month. Okay, so yes, it already had the 3 month supply. This is why I was bearish on it previously because it was testing up into that 3 month zone. I wanted a little bit higher, which it front ran annoyingly. And now again, like it's gone up, tapped up into this 3 week zone, but again, not quite hit that monthly level. But yeah, so it's possible all these three alerts, 3 or 4 alerts, Link, Doggy, ADA, and Atom are all going to go off like if we get another test of the highs. So that'll be interesting to watch out for. And then, yeah, looking for longs down in here on this, which I've been waiting for probably about a year. So yeah, you can see like all up, the majors aren't looking really that good. So does that mean Bitcoin's not going to look that good and it's going to drag everything down lower, or does it mean actually Bitcoin's going to go up and then all the money's going to get further sucked out of alts, dropping alts again? But really, yeah, there's not much on here that I can be bullish about at the moment. Like, the only thing kind of in all of these favor is the weakness of supply. So it is possible, but I can't assume it. This is not very clean. This is ADA, for example. Actually, it's a 2 day supply, but sorry, 2 month supply. But it is weak. It hasn't closed. It's closed a decent red candle, but it hasn't closed significantly below that green low, and in fact, has only swing failed it. So it is possible that the higher lows can play out. So the bull scenario is that this is going to be a higher low, this is a weak supply, and it's just going to run back through it, flip it to demand, and then we have alt season for Christmas. So there is that possible scenario. But for me, like I say, it's not something I want to trade against. I would rather trade other alts that are cleaner and that don't have those supplies. Yeah, so that's kind of it on the majors. I've done quite a long time on this stream now. So I wonder if I can just do a bit of a too long don't read on the majors. Just a little summary that I can then cut out later for a short. Thinking about it, what's the best thing to look at, or to summarize. I don't know, I've probably covered enough of this now, really, I think. Yeah, I'm just torn. I guess so. In summary, for all the majors, not all the majors. Okay, so in summary, some of the majors differ, but for the most part, with the majors, I'm a little bit torn. I think we're in a scenario where we've got strong impulses up, and particularly on these ones that we're talking about, mostly on this layout, Link, Doggy, and Ada. They've all fallen back into major demands. So for the most part, like annual 6 month demands. And but these demands are weak because they haven't really had significant moves away from them. So using ADA as an example, it's had a decent move, but it's come back and tested a little bit quickly. But this move hasn't been able to take out the high. Doesn't mean it's not going to, but so far it hasn't been able to take out the high. So the risk we have, so while we can trade longs on these demands, the risk we have is that these moves are a corrective. So we've had an impulse up, we've had an A move down, we've got a B move up, and then we're going to get a C move that may come down to a lower demand, or more bullishly might make a triangle kind of structure, and then we get another impulse up. I was more confident of those scenarios, or even having a shallow, maybe having a third wave, another 4-5 wave up to here. I was more confident of that possibility previously. Unfortunately, this monthly close has made me less confident because all of the majors, or a vast majority of the majors, have made 1 month or 3 month supply. The new majors anyway. So yeah, that's kind of probably the quickest summary I can give on the majors. The on the old majors, the only two that really are worth, or in fact, across all the majors, the three that are worth watching for more confident longs, although still all weak demands, but they are on the new majors, it's BNB, and on the old majors, it's TRX and BCH. So you should watch those 3-month demands. Because if we are going to get decent runs, it'll be bounces on those levels, or like hopefully not just deep inside the zones. They're big zones, but like those are ones you should just really watch to see if you're going to get a reaction off the 3-month level. So for TRX, that's around 2.25. BCH is 433. BNB has already tested the monthly level. So BNB, you're looking either for a retest on that monthly level or more aggressively for the possibility of a higher low on around the 6 to 620 mark on this 8-hour demand, but that possibly could be too aggressive. But we shall see. Yeah, so that's that, and I've done far too much education, so this video is obviously, as usual, way longer than I wanted it to be. I did promise to do SUI, so I'll do that and see how I feel once I've done that. So, so I started to look at some of these as well. I look at waves while we're here. Again, this is another one that's so hard when you look at the high time frames with all my drawings. Again, this this close below creating a 6-month supply. Now, like, it might go up inside here. It's a weak supply, but it's making, like, a lot of these are making me really quite nervous, because in some instances, that's why I put this aggressive entry on waves and got the short off there. Alerted earlier this morning, because in some cases when you see these new supplies made or new demands made and it gets that instant test in the first few days of the next month, you can have a significant move off it. So, hopefully, I don't know, is it all going to be over for waves if that's the case? It's had this tap into here into 6-month supply, and it's hit the weekly inside 6-month, 3 weekly inside 6-month supply. Is it just going to drop like a stone from here? So I really start watching these and start chasing them down, but be very careful what alts you're trading, and that you're not trading into major supply. And, I hope I'm wrong. I hope, the higher low, it might win over the supply, but I really, it's not something I trade against. Anyway, so SUI was my request. Scrolling down my stupidly long list. Anybody watching at the moment, say hi. Feel free to request anything, because I'm just going to move on to alts and what people have asked for. Okay, so SUI. Just see why I don't know if I've updated this for the 6-month, 3-month close. So we had an annual demand down here. It's come up, hasn't tested that again. Then made a 3-month demand, and that's where we got entries on this back earlier this year. Yeah, I don't love that. So it's another one. So this has had a close, creating a 2-month supply. So I'm hoping this was requested in my Telegram channel yesterday. I'm hoping this isn't somebody who's trapped in this from higher. Yeah, so okay, so what we've got, so we've had this close slightly below here, so it's made a 2-month supply, so my bias is now short on this. The bigger picture is obviously long. However, if you had a bounce off this 3-month, it's been unable to break the high, and it's now made a 2-month supply. I think the probabilities are going to be that reject off here and then come down and take out that April low. And whether it then bounces in here or potentially comes back down to the annual level, I'm not sure, but we'll have to see. But that would be my initial high time frame thoughts on this. Down to the lower time frames. In its favor, it's had this grind down, so there isn't much supply. It could sort of stop hunt through this supply. So many of these, and these are the other challenges, so many of these are just looking really, really choppy and nasty above, so it's really quite hard to judge. Sorry, what that line was. I'm updating some of these lines while I'm here. And you also asked for the BTC pair, so I'll have a look at that too. So I did have a short entry up here for 4-5 day supply for the lower high. That's a bit messy and choppy now, so I don't love that as a short entry. But really, yeah, so I guess my bigger concern on this is this creation of 2-month supply, and we're very tight on it. It's very close to price, but yeah, I mean, I would like to know the kind of why I've been asked to chart this, whether it's for an entry or whether it's because somebody's trapped having bought the top. And if you bought the top, I'm sorry, but I can't be that confident about it. I guess in its favor, it's on 3 month demand here, but it's a question of what this second wave of correction is going to do. So again, like I've just been explaining for so much else, we've got this up impulse. We had an A, B, and C. This could make a triangle. So you again might get lucky, and we get that. But now we've got this 2 month supply in here. That makes that significantly less likely than if we didn't have 2 month supply in there. So I guess there's still some hope that we might get a consolidation through here and a breakout, but don't long this now. I would say possibly don't short it either, because SUI is one of the the stronger pairs. So I don't actually like that short. I'm going to remove that. Don't like that entry at all, nor do I like that entry. So I say, in its favor, it's on 3 months demand. So I guess that makes me less inclined to short. If I've got a short up here, then fine. It's coming off a weekly supply there. But now it's just in that kind of like, is this going to be a triangle or not structure? So, I think there's not much more I can say on that, unfortunately. There's nothing I really want to trade on this right now. And even looking at the history, we had sort of the, this sort of much more extended correction, and then really did push from the the second wave. But obviously that was sort of like late July or end of last year, kind of the alt season that we had, and so we went really hard in that. So maybe that'll happen. But again, so if you got these entries here, hold by all means, based on the fact we had this test on 3 month demand. It's also got a 2 month a little bit lower that hasn't been tapped. So there's a 2 month level there. I think, this is another one I really wanted it to take out these lows. So my preference would be on this is that wait for those lows to be taken out for long entries, or just wait, see what happens here. Like I need to see more. I need to see if this can flip. So for now, we've got a decent move. That's at least a decent strong move off this correction. And now it's had another slow correction. Talking about low momentum, that's kind of that low momentum that we've had down. But we're still in now, this down move. We've retraced some of it. Is it going to continue the down move? But I need to see kind of, what's going to happen if and when we get back here, particularly in view of the fact we now have a 2 month supply that it's hitting. So yeah, I'm guessing that's not what you want to hear, because that's never what anybody wants to hear when they're asking me about a coin. But unfortunately, I can't give you more than that. Bitcoin pair. What you can do is see me chart something from scratch. Let me just check. Just want to check I've got enough all the history on this. May 2023. This is also May 2023. So don't normally have the opportunity to chart things from scratch because I've got everything charted already, but here we go. So nothing on the yearly. So we've got a 6 months demand there. So I chart everything top down. 6 months, 3 months. So I see from the yearly. If anything, I wish I could go to the 5-year in some cases, but they don't seem to offer that on TradingView, which is really annoying. Quite like them to have higher time frames. Okay, 6 months demand, which hasn't quite been tested, but we got very close. It's got a 3 month sitting on top of that, so it's a little bit choppy in there. It's now also got a 2 month supply. And also a 1 month closer. Yeah, it's another tough one that coming in trading the 6, so I would like this a little bit lower. So I guess in a perfect world, this would at least get a touch lower and tap into that 6 months and see what happens. In a perfect world, it would go up into this 2 month before doing that. And obviously that's probably a time frame that I wasn't being asked about, but if you saw that, then I'd be more confident of looking for longs, because it means the supply has already been tested. Even here, this monthly being tested before that drop, but it means the supply has already been tested once. So if we then later hit the 6 month or higher time frame demand, then it's more likely that move's going to run through everything. Down to the lower, hold on. So we've got 3-week kind of indirect supply there. Two-week demand down here, already been tested. Yeah, I mean, really what I can say, I guess, at the first, there's nothing on this also, similar to, so both of these, like this SUIBTC and SUI US dollar, kind of for me, I would be like no trade zones. Like, if you're trapped in them, you're going to have to ask me separately, like what to do to get out, because that's another question. But from an analysis perspective, these are not, well, the BTC pair is, it's hit and miss as to whether you want to long this, but the US dollar pair is not in a place I want to long at all. And even the BTC pair, like, while like we're close, we're in this 3-month demand and we're close to this 6-month level. I don't like that we just haven't drawn it in, but I don't like that we've just closed just below this, making this monthly supply, and that we're kind of getting hung up even right at the bottom there. Then there's the 2 months significantly higher, so it could get a bigger move up inside this. But really, again, like, this is the kind of thing that I either want to see a swing failure of this low into this 6-month level, or I would want to see a long entry down here. So like potentially there, or down here. In a perfect world, and move up and down into that first, because then it takes out some of the supply first. But again, this is not something I want to long. So when I talk about things I want to long and want to short, I guess, at least from the high time frames as well, it's like I want to look at clean zones. I want, a nice clean. So the 6-month here is a nice clean zone. Actually, it's not that clean because it's 2 candles. Even the 3-month would have been a nice clean zone when it was tested on the October candle last year. But the thing is, now we're looking at a second test on that zone. So in fact, we had the immediate test on this candle here in October last year. Then we've had 3 tests that have come down deeper inside and another bounce. So this is now, and then we've got a third bounce that's hit it this month or last month. So we're now on third test on this 3-month demand. So I don't want to long anything on a third test. Even the second is a stretch for me. I would rather, and if I would, then it would be on taking out the low from the previous. So again, this wick hasn't quite taken out that low. In the favor of this, it does have a 6-month level right below, so that is a possibility. But in this kind of instance, again, you're looking at the strength of the zone. So this the zone had a move up. It did take out this high. It didn't take out this high. It's come back down. It's tested multiple times and still has been unable to take out any of the supply. So there's nothing that's really given me confidence of the strength of this zone right now. And we're in a kind of mini local downtrend. In its favor, we're at support. We're close to the 6 months, so this is not a horrendous place to be longing, but it's not as high probability as many others. Or like even if we were on this first move down into that zone when the zone is clean, it's had a decent bounce, but now it's back. Hasn't had any follow up. So in the context of, I add this to a list while I remember. Moved all the adding to list things. Right, it's not going to work. Some water. I don't know, I'll save it later. Anyway. So in the context of this, so when you're trading your US dollar pairs, you want, to make it a really good trade, you want your US dollar pair to be at support at the same time as your Bitcoin pair. So we've got the Bitcoin pair at possible support, but we've got the US dollar pair at resistance. So does that mean, like that can mean that if we got a bounce off the BTC pair, while this fell down, it could just mean this falls less than Bitcoin. But that basically means the whole market's going to fall. And given most people, when they're asking me to chart something, they want a long. It's rare that people are asking because they're looking for a short entry. That doesn't make me confident of longs on this. So yeah, like I'll probably ask further as to what the intent of the question was. But even if I come with the bullish scenario, it's still like, okay, this is in a triangle. This is still going to need some time. It's not a trade. I would just go, yeah, buy now and expect, $10 before the end of the year. Sure, you might get that, but the long-term investment, that's up to you. If you want to do that, with your stop down here, that's entirely up to you. But for me, this is not a good investment entry or a good trade entry in either direction. So yeah, if it does a bit more, if it does anything significant, feel free to let me know if I've missed it and ask me for a new chart on it. But yeah, your best case scenario is that it's going to triangle and eventually break out of the triangle. So assuming this, in the bigger picture, I guess, assuming this came from down here before it was listed on Binance, then maybe we're getting a 1, 2, 3. And what you can get is when you get a sharp correction on the second wave 2. So if this is wave, ignore that actually. If this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ignore that beginning one, but if there's one, like quite often if you get a sharp correction on the first wave on wave 2, then wave 4 can be more of a sideways one, or vice versa. If wave 2 is a sideways one, then wave 4 is more likely to be sharp. So that makes it more possible that this is a triangle correction. But again, from a high time frame perspective, the entry is not now. The entries were either on that weekly that we just hit, or back on this monthly down here. Yeah, so that's that. Now it's almost 6 o'clock. Let's check. It's messaging me. So water drinks at 7:30. Okay, so drinks at 7:30. So maybe I can do like half an hour more. So yeah, I did share yesterday these other layouts, but I said be quite wary. So I was just looking at far too many things and things that may become bullish. But I just did say be wary, because obviously I don't like things when we're waiting for things to break out and Bitcoin's suddenly at kind of resistance. That makes it slightly more nerve-wracking, and that's kind of what we're seeing here, is that they were trying a bit to hold for a while and bounce, but now we're making a little bit of supply. And there were also ones that were very high risk anyway, because in many cases, like new coins, like not all of them, but like KBBB, Skate, NEWT were all new coins, so like whether they're going to have the impetus, but I think they're always worth watching, because these are the ones that are going to give you 10 times if the market allows it. Or was something I was interested in, because Or made a monthly demand. It's a bit of a dubious one, I think, because it's a MEXC, like I think it's where MEXC opened, or CoinEx. Like if all the exchanges don't have it, it's hard to say. Something came up with a 2-month. Interesting. Yeah, so it made a monthly demand, and it did, like we had an alert on the low of that from like a couple of weeks ago, and it took ages to move, and I kind of forgot about it, and then it suddenly pumped yesterday, and I had some alerts here, but I said to leave them alone because maybe it was a decent move. But yeah, again, watch this as it comes back into that level for a retest, 4-day, 2-day demand. And then yeah, I think now, like if Bitcoin's coming down, KBB, Skate, and NEWT are going to probably get crucified. Or would be the one to watch, possibly AGT. AGT again has had quite a lot of consolidation, and has a nice amount of space. So that's the other thing I'm looking for, things which have a nice amount of space to supply this. And AIOT had a big fall off a cliff. So again, like these are high risk, but they have the capacity. So AIOT and AGT have the capacity to move far if they want to. So they're worth an eye. TUPE had just broken all-time high. So that's why this was on the list, just to see, if it was going to consolidate through here. And again, the timing is just really hard on these, because some of these sometimes they just run straight away, like you get some crazy ones, and other times they consolidate for ages and then just go, no, I'd give up. Because we had a crazy move on BR yesterday. I'll show that in a minute. Let me just see. So my final one was BMT, which is something I've watched for ages, because I was watching for it to take out all these stops back over here, which had a really solid move off that entry there. Then a retest, and now it's just been chopping, but it seemed like it was consolidating, wanting to kind of break out here. So I still really want to keep an eye on this, and I've got an alert here for the 4-day demand if it comes back in, or the weekly here. But again, it's just taking its sweet time, so it's not something you want to hold on to, but you really need to be watching, or you're going to miss it if it does break out. Let's go back over to my other. So these are the more recent alerts I've been looking at. Again, for the group, I've made like a watch list of the July alerts, so they can start having a look or keeping track of what's going on. I'll run through a few of these. So again, I'm looking at the sort of very aggressive ones on some of the MEXC charts, when they have an aggressive, when they have just a clear, easy new short structure, then they're absolutely worth trying to get like aggressive entries in, not waiting for really deep retracements back up there and just going, okay, 3-day supply, look for the drop. So obviously we've got that on Iris now making a new low. So those ones are really nice to look at. Bank, This was obviously a more bullish one. I'd forgotten about this, like that this alert came in and I was like, oh, didn't even know I had that there. This is obviously a bit stronger. It's come up into the weekly supply again, but now I quite like the look of this one actually. So it's something I actually wanted to keep a look on, an eye on from the long side. Thought I moved this entry up. Yeah, so I think it's worth, this is worth looking for, keeping an eye on this 3-day demand for the possibility of a more aggressive long if it comes down, like it's being stronger. So the short hasn't worked terribly well. It's still in the larger 5-day supply. It's now gone up into weekly, retesting the weekly inside that, but it's still very early days. But you can see this type of structure ultimately again making that kind of triangle, maybe. Again, if the market allows it. Scale I just talked about. Obviously, this is it starts to look like it's going to break out. In this case, it just went straight up. So we had a really nice short on that. And, a couple of longs got the move up into there. And then this has come back down and for a 4-day demand. Did eventually get a bit of a bounce, but it's like struggling now. So I come back deeper. And I said there was always a risk on this. It was going to take these trend line stops. So not overly surprised if that starts dropping from there. IRISVIRTUAL we just talked about. Syrup again, like I think I've talked about this in previous streams. So yeah, let's quickly on those. I'll show that other. So the other layer I was looking at were the things that were very, very overextended. So like useless, bananas, hype for syrup, again, just trading in both directions. So white, I had kind of hoped for this hit monthly demand. So it was looking for longs up there, but it just cleanly rejected a 12-hour supply and really fell off a cliff yesterday. Haven't updated this since, still a monthly demand, but it's a fairly nasty, aggressive move down it had. ZBCN, I did put a more aggressive long on this. Talked about this the last stream. I had an aggressive short there. I had another possible short re-entry here. So I'm kind of on the fence about deleting. It's a 4-day, 5-day supply around this area, like either up to that or in that pink line, I think. So it could run higher in here, but now I'm kind of like, this has got trend line stops. Actually, now I'm looking at it, I'm just like, no. That needs to be deleted now. I did put a more aggressive long entry in here because I kind of thought, if this holds a 12-hour level, there's also a 6-month level from historically there, which is a pretty shitty one, but you never know. But now with all these trend line stops, again, worth watching for in case it just runs a wick through all those trend line stops there. TIBBIR also, that happened. TIBBIR again in the last stream, I think I said we've got long entry, short entry, long entry, short entry, and then I said I wanted to leave it because once I've had another Elliot Wave thing, once I've had a 1, 2, 3 on an ABC, then I start going, not sure which direction it's going in. This short played out quite nicely. So the alert went for this 5-day. I think it hit on a couple of the exchanges, but I think not on this. I'm charting this on KSEX. The wick didn't quite get into that level, but I think it did on some others, but it probably would have been too quick to trade. And that was a very tentative zone anyway, because this is so choppy all the way up. But yeah, that might drop off the list now because it's just meandering around. Syrup I just started talking about before, so syrup had a weekly demand there, so that had a nice reaction off it. Again, didn't quite hit my short possible entry. Obviously still in an uptrend, so still like the shorts, so this short failed because I was being too aggressive, that long failed because I was being too aggressive. Like it's better to wait for the extremes, but sometimes I just go, oh, what the hell, I try and do a more aggressive one because occasionally you'll miss things if you wait for the extremes. And even on this, I said, there's a possibility this comes down to that 8-hour and like fills the channel a bit more. So we might still get a drop on this. It'd be nice if it comes up into the short first, but you might still get that kind of move that might be tradable from a short down there and along here. It's just trading all those scalps. Form was another one like I had. It was just like I had the wick down through the monthly demand. I then called and talked about in a number of videos and in the channel about longing the retest of the monthly demand here. So a really solid move, and then just didn't come back. So I had a long re-entry here on daily demand, didn't come back, and then I pulled it up and had one on the 4-hour demand, still hasn't come back to there. So then I pulled it up and had it on this daily / 4-day demand here. And now it's kind of weakened off a bit, and it's a bit risky. Once you get this high, then obviously, we are now in a scenario that maybe we're going to make a lower high. So it is again aggressive levels, and yeah, I'm bit on the fence about this one as well. But again, you know, you can just get some swings in here if we're not going to get some big, you know, fall from Bitcoin, then these could give still nice swings. But yeah, you can keep an eye on this to see if we're going to be lucky enough to get another push from there to the high. Seems a tad optimistic, I think, on form at the moment, though. Banana's still patiently waiting for it to get back to that level. So again, if you haven't seen previous videos, I called longs on this monthly demand for the original hit and then the retest at the bottom here. I had an alert go for a swing failure or breakout retest of the all-time high, but it just took off and then fell off a cliff, but also didn't quite come back to my long entry, sadly. Still patiently waiting to see if we get a reaction at that level for a short. What else haven't I covered? Did I talk about hype? Did not talk about hype. So again, hype, a little bit in two minds about this, that if this is starting to look a bit like a head and shoulders, so yeah, I need to maybe think through this one a little bit more. But again, just some nice swings. I had a long entry on this 4-day demand, obviously came almost to the bottom of it before bouncing, then a short from 8-hour supply, long from 8-hour demand, and then another long re-entry, and again, syrup hasn't quite reached where I would have liked the short. So I think some of these, yeah, I mean, I guess when I'm thinking about everything, I feel like, yeah, we had some of the majors just front run my short entries, like Link and Doggy and ADA. We have Bitcoin that didn't quite take out the high, even though CME did. We've got a few things like this, you know, like syrup, you know, didn't quite hit that level. Syrup the same, just didn't quite hit the level I wanted. So kind of like all of this for me maybe is pointing to a little bit more up and then a bigger drop. So I guess we'll see if we get that over the weekend. And then finally useless, which I've been trying to, again, looking for aggressive shorts on this, because this I think is going to be a really nice short when it happens. And this could make you a lot of money. So if, who was it who was talking to me? Multisec, if you're still there, this would be your short entry you should be watching and waiting for to make your 1400 back. So now maybe, so if we make a 12-hour supply, that's going to be a new possible short entry on this. For now, like what we had, so we started to drop yesterday, so I had an aggressive short, just, you know, again, transparency, I've talked about this already, but at this point in time, I made a 4-hour supply, so I had a possible short entry there, which just plowed straight through. Slowed down again here. So then yesterday I talked about a short entry on 8-hour supply in there. It's still holding 4-hour demand, but again, we're looking like, obviously now we might get a bigger consolidation. So that 8-hour is still holding. Let's come up higher inside it today. Oh, coffee's starting to get bad now. If we create a new 12-hour supply in here, if this candle closes a bit more bearishly than it's currently looking, we still have a 12-hour demand below, but I think it's going to start, you know, this is starting to look like maybe we're going to get at least some bigger moves that we can swing. But it's very early days, like I said, but I'm just maybe being hopeful to still, we could still end up with a lot of chop like this with the many 12-hour candles if we want to. Hi, Deepak. Yeah, but so, you know, the reason I'm looking for shorts on this is just because I feel like this is going to be a really nice drop when it comes, so I just want to be ready for it. Oh, I'm going to have to sign off, I think, because this cough is getting outrageous. Okay, so yeah, let me just have a look at how some of these other entries are doing or that have gone in the last few days. So yeah, so since the start of July, I've had a whole bunch of alerts go. I added a few others in that I just wanted to track. Oh, HIFI. Yeah, things I wanted to track, like HIFI, for example, because so something like this is me being a little bit crazy, but I just wanted to watch how it went. So this, I had an alert, I think, for 5-day weekly supply here. But again, the momentum was strong on this. It had a second push up, managed to make a higher high, and I kind of thought, okay, I feel like, for some reason, I felt like this could go higher in the zone. Big of a drop here to fill in, so I put an aggressive long on the daily demand there. So again, it had a nice little push up and just about taken out that daily zone there, actually. So again, yeah, just something I wanted to watch for a bit of follow-up. It's a little bit risky, but yeah, no, I just like to keep track of these things. KAIA again, yeah, this was one I wanted to break down on, but I kind of thought, again, might get a bounce off this 4-day demand in here, hopefully up to here to allow a new short. Hasn't given very much off that, and it's just rejected directly off daily supply. So each of these alerts, like I said, that's why I say I leave it up to people how they want to trade them, because you can trade, this is a higher risk long, and I said as much because I said it's in an annual and 3-month supply here. And obviously my bias is short, but it doesn't mean it's not going to give you a scalp up to here. So I let people trade things as they will. PRAI, another 12%. So PRAI, again, is something I talked about in previous streams. I had an alert for a trend line break that was a steeper trend line break here. But I then said it wasn't definitive enough. There was a daily demand in here that I wasn't overly comfortable about that. And then what it ended up doing was coming back up into the daily supply here for a retest, made a higher high. Then I added another alert for a potential short entry. But at that point in time, it then had a 3-day demand below, so it made it kind of higher risk. So I left it alone, and now obviously that would be the time it's decided to fall off a cliff. So if it makes a new weekly supply, I'm going to bring that down a bit, just so I'm covering my bases. This is going to make a decent short re-entry. At the moment I've got like the average short re-entry would be on the 3-day, but if it confirms a weekly as well, then you can potentially start looking at shorts on this a little bit lower. But that's a really nice drop off that. What else do we want to look at? ALU, yeah, this is just a high risk. It's a hit and hope. Just need to give it some time. It's in a 2-month demand, so I was kind of hoping even from up here we get a decent bounce. I had such a strong move up from here, but really gave very little off that monthly demand at the start. You've played these games before. What do you mean, Sada? Like trading games? Unfortunately, it's not really a game. It's kind of my career. So, if only it were just a game, as simple as that. But it's real money. Anyway, yeah, Ali, you can watch for a bounce on that. But yeah, just hit and hope. When again, it was like, so a lot of these I put in alerts, and I've just said, these are, you might get higher lows, you might get, but I've said they're high risk, things like this, and so many of these charts, this is like, people can call this a long if they want, but this is a downtrend. This is very clearly a downtrend, and the target is very clearly below this low. What we're hoping for is maybe we're going to get a reversal, maybe we're going to get a tradable bounce, into here, and then the low will come down. But yeah, so all the ones I say when the alert comes through as high risk is because we're in a downtrend. And I can hope at some point, it's going to reverse, and maybe it's at this point. This one is a possibility. It's only off the weekly there; it didn't quite hit this 2-month level, so maybe this can come back up to a second wave before continuing that downtrend. And at some point it's going to reverse, but at this point in time there is nothing that's telling me this is going to reverse other than the hope that a demand is going to bounce that's nearer the start of the last up move. So I guess we'll see. Don't really like having, I'm not sure, yeah, again that's a short that would have missed previously. But yeah, so the in the favor of some of these longs though, at least, is that so many of these now have these kind of trend line stops. So it is possible we get, if these do pick up support, that's why I thought they were worth watching, that they could just pump through all these stops that things have got above. NYX is just ridiculous. So yeah, this is just sometimes what happens with shitcoins, that you just can't really. So yeah, I did have long possibly on 2-day demand here, on weekly demand, got a nice bounce, but then just collapsed. And I think now it's just through. It's gonna die. If it's worth having, call it an aggressive short entry that never got tested. ALGO, is another example of just looking for shorts for continuing the downtrend. Again, had the bounce there. I still would like this to test lower. So again, just looking for an aggressive short on a 5-day supply is fairly simple. So again, like if you're trading, just don't overcomplicate things. Like, it doesn't need to be so complicated. You can just go, it's a supply, it's a demand, I'm going to trade it, I'm going to put my stop on the other side of it, and we'll see what happens. And particularly something that's generally weaker and got volume like ALGO. Nothing wrong with just blindly entering there and just letting it run. XO, what do we have here? Okay, yeah, so long entry there, actually had quite a nice bounce, comes straight back up here. So this, again, could go either way, but that's actually something I quite want to keep on my radar. Yeah, let's again another bounce straight back up into supply. Like I have to do a lot more analysis on these to see what they might go, whether they're going to go further or not. LAUNCHCOIN was kind of interesting. So yeah, that gave a bounce but didn't get very high, and now it's coming back lower. Like this really again, I want to look for shorts on this. If we're going to fall off a cliff, this could really fall quite nicely. So I did keep that on my radar as well. Would have been nice if it had come up to my short entry. I need to rechart that and look on the lower time frames. But again, I'm trying to keep this stream down to a kind of a dull raw resolve. Really nice short entry there that just ran straight down. S&T hit a long, but I'm just not. Yeah, this again is another crazy shitcoin. I already talked about BSW. Yeah, that was a possible long entry on retest of this zone. And we talked about this briefly in the group, and I think it's coming down from a monthly supply. Not surprising. So this is why I say these entries are high risk. Once you've had the rejection off the major monthly supply, even if it's not a strong supply, but the target is to take out the previous low. And maybe you'll get, this gave like a day's bounce in between, so maybe you'll get a bounce in between, but not always. Like it can just run straight through. SEA, we made a higher low, but we're in 2 months supply, so TROLLSOL was another alert that I shared yesterday. I think I wanted to take out these stops and the possibility of going into 12-hour supply, so it just fell short just of the 12-hour supply, but it's going to come down quite nicely into there. And now back on daily demand here. That's kind of an interesting chart. So if this does hold the trend line breakout, that could be pretty nice. That's actually worth keeping an eye on. So also something else to keep on the radar. Again, there's a lot of these, so I don't want to go through. Oh my god, what GOG do? Oh, okay, yeah. Crazy coins. Don't care about that too much. Yeah, so I can see a few of these I know shorts came in on. Some of them I put more aggressive longs, so like Swarms and HFT. Had shorts come in from a big pump. So we're back in, I feel like we're back in the kind of land that we were in maybe towards the start of the year, where every pump I was just finding short entries and we're shorting every pump back down to zero. I feel like maybe we're in that kind of market again. ASR is kind of an interesting one. Like it's actually one of the more bullish ones, but it's in an annual supply. So I thought for fun, I would put in an aggressive short entry on 8-hour supply here because it's got a nice big gap it can drop down to here. So that's pretty, given a little reaction to start with, and now has made a new 12-hour supply. Could fall down there. What else? APX is a bit of a disappointment so far. This is another one of the ones that I was really hoping would break out. Again, it's holding a monthly demand at the lows, but it's just taking its sweet time going anywhere. And I had an alert for this daily demand, which took ages to hit. But yeah, keep that on your radar for possible longs, but just, have the patience of a saint. Fun is just crazy. I don't even know why I have alerts on this. So the PA on this and BR from yesterday was just like mental. So we had there was a 30-minute, so this is obviously, so we had a 30-minute supply alert went here, and then there's just been this sideways, God knows what PA that is yet, that all there for a week, or what's that, a week or so. Then it went up and hit my 30-minute supply there, dropped down, but then came straight back up again, and is now just sort of winging its way back up. But it's just horrible price action there. And BR is even worse. BR is just, I don't even know what this is. It was going sideways for everything. I'd put a possible entry there. This is like a 1 minute. If I look at the 1 minute chart, again, you would have had to been quick off the mark to get that because it basically fell down. And about 3 minutes later went all the way back up again. Then it stayed sideways for another few hours and then just suddenly pumped. And I think this alert actually, my alerts got mixed up here, but I'm not sure whether this alert went and then it obviously went up to the next alert anyway. I feel like that alert went yesterday for here, which should really have hit before. Anyway, so yeah, you can keep an eye on that for shorts if you would like of the crazy persuasion. But yeah, that would have been a really nice trade if you managed to get that one, but it's a bit mental. Yeah, other than that, I guess there's not much else I want to say. I think it's just running through so many alts. There are a couple that look like this, and these are the only ones that I would say maybe, again, just keep an eye on if they appear. Like I said, we've got these trend line stops on quite a few of these things. So I said the same, like when this fell into here yesterday, and then there is, so it's got this weekly demand it hit yesterday, and then it's also got this sort of 5-day, I think, just inside it. Yeah, there's a 5-day down there. So keep an eye on this. If this shows any signs of reversal, like jump in, because this could well squeeze through all the stops up there. And that's what you're really looking for. I may not go all the way up here, but that's what you're looking for, the squeeze on that. There was DUPE and there was port 3 was the other. Scroll to get down to port 3. This was actually looking a little bit stronger, so I actually set an alert on this trend line. So it just front run my entry there, so I shared it in the group because I was looking at it at that time. So this alert might actually go soon because these alerts are trend line alerts. It's set if it closes above here, has to be on the linear chart, on the 8-hour candle normally. So yeah, it hasn't quite closed above on the 8-hour candle, but might in the next 6 hours. Maybe we'll get a run through here. But yeah, keep an eye on that because that could like stop hunt through all that PA up there. Anyway, yeah, that's like God, that's 2.5 hour stream. I'm gonna make a move now. That's a little bit more haphazard than I like on the stream. I prefer to be a bit more formal and know what I'm going through. But there's just it's hard, I think, when I'm asked questions because then I tend to digress with long explanations, which are useful for people, so that's good. But then also kind of like makes my streams insanely long. Anyway, yeah, I'll stop this now so I can do some. I can firstly go for dinner and go for a drink, but also can do the timestamps on it before I go out. And then yeah, so I hope that helps. Feel free to like and subscribe if you like my content. Feel free to join my Telegram and put any requests in that you want, if there's anything you want to see. And yeah, let me know. Yeah, let me know if you've got any feedback. So I hope you all have a good weekend, and I hope that's useful. Good luck with your trading.